Visitors, welcome to the library. Once more. I believe I have read somewhere that patch 11 for Space Marine 2 is dropping tomorrow. Wish I had an easy way to verify this somewhere. Not that I'm, in their Discord or anything. That's crazy talk. Go there. Discord. Scroll to their Discord. Announcements, that case, Steam Awards, blah, blah, blah. I don't care. I do remember the 25th coming up, and yeah, the Reclamation update rolls out on November 25th. So that'll be something to keep an eye on. Chaos Spawn will have heads that you can shoot. Stuff will come out and things will happen. I don't remember the rest of the details. For some reason, Chaos Spawns will have corrected hitboxes for headshots. This is like the only thing that seems to matter in my brain. I think I've just seen a lot of people issue that as a pain point. Let's put it kindly. Yeah. I think, is Monster Hunter coming out with something? I don't know. I'm not in a Monster Hunter Wilds Discord. Perhaps I should be. It is fine. Let's go to Stream Manager. Here we go. Oh, let's see. I hope everyone has had a wonderful day. I had to go into work today. I largely work from home otherwise. Someone from out of town, from one of our partners, was coming in to do a... It's always a work review, but if we're totally honest and we read between the lines, yada, 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 it was a social slash networking visit, right? And that's fine. It happens once or twice a year kind of idea. It's not exorbitant by any means. And it helps you sort of, get... Video conferencing is great. That's how we do things 99% of the time, and it gets the work done, it gets the job done. But it's nice to shake hands every now and then, I suppose. Not too often, though. Don't want to become social butterflies or anything. But, I forgot my water again. Vilana, it's your fault. I forgot my water. But, yeah, I spent basically the whole day sitting in our meeting room. I got there early in the morning, and I think I misunderstood. Yeah, shake hands, share germs, exactly. That's going to be a thing. Have you shared your germs today? Make sure you're sharing enough germs. There's one of those dystopian, utopia futures and movies and stuff, right, where people are so separated from one another that they don't touch, they don't interact, and it's kind of an illusion of a utopia within a dystopian future, right? It's very sad and lonely from our perspective, but it's become the norm for them that their paradise is one in which they're sterile and clean and safe from even the most remotest possibility of contaminant in any form. Sounds kind of nice, really. That's what I try to do with my basement. Yep. It's isolated. It's underground. It's the closest thing I can get to an underground bunker, I suppose. Every man's dream. And I suppose a few women. It's any person's dream. It's optional. I encourage it no matter who you are. I'm being bleeped at. Oh, no, one of our favorite streamers is going live. Good luck. I hope he has a wonderful stream. But, yeah. So basically, he spent the day. He was kind of late. But, yeah, I spent the entire day talking shop. And then I came home and had dinner, and now I'm kind of sleepy. Yeah, that's Valana's fault, too. That's because that's what she fed me. What do we have on here? Do I have another message, or was that was just the announcement? Yeah. It was just the announcement. What are these other messages I have? Oh, my parking has run out. At the university, we have paid parking, so you can do that through the app. And Onion Headlines has published another funny on Trump. Just sometimes I think we certainly live in dark times, perhaps. I got an amazing picture from Valana today while I was in work. She made a little fort in the deck room, and the kitty cats were in the fort, and just hanging out as kitty cats are wanted to do. So she took a photo, and maybe was in the middle of blapping. She was cleaning herself, and her tongue was just like out on full display during the photo. It was kind of funny. Look, Gwen. I just got my water delivered, and now there's a kitty cat on Valana's shoulder staring at me. Hello. You going back upstairs now? Have a safe trip up the stairs. Or better even, don't trip up the stairs. Just have a safe journey up the stairs. Yeah, there you go. Off she goes. I go to spray my throat. Let me get reading. We are reading The Secret Garden. We're up to chapter 21. It's been a week since we read this, so it's a little harder to remember what the hell we did last time. We were introduced. So the very first reading we had 10 chapters, and the second reading we again had 10 chapters. And so from chapters 11 to 20, we were introduced to the rich boy. Good Lord, what was his name? His name was... something about Colin. Yes, thank you. Was it Colin? It doesn't sound right. There's Mary Dickon. And, yeah, cool. You know, there you go, Colin. So he is a brat. A rich boy's brat, spoiled and scared for his life, and he has had some recent character growth. And end of chapter 20, I believe he was just introduced into the garden. Was it the case when we started reading chapter 11 that Dickon had just entered the garden? Isn't that a coincidence? What a well-paced story, if you think about that. That's pretty cool. Pretty, groovy, as the kids say. They say that. I know it. It's what's cool. Yes. And the very last he exclaimed, "He shall get well, and he shall live forever and ever and ever." It's a little ambitious, but I suspect all rich folk have the same dream. If they can just spend enough money, they can live forever and ever and ever. Yes. What do you think about living forever? Is that something, do you think immortality would be interesting, or would it get boring? Or would you forget enough stuff over time that life could remain interesting? In my opinion, I think if I had the choice, I would like to live forever. I am very curious about what will happen in our future. Now, that's a very simple idea. It doesn't account, like, you could go for very extreme, very extremes, very distant in the future, when you'll eventually find out what happens to the universe, and then if you're just like immortal and can never die, you'll be terribly lonely after that. Also, possibly alive in a space that doesn't exist and is impossible to support you. So, man, there's got to be a limit to that, right? Honestly, if every other human dies, you should probably just be done at that time. Yeah, I think if our species becomes extinct and there's no one to talk to, perhaps it is time for you to pass on as well. That wouldn't be the worst thing. I mean, if I give you a second to think about that, that'd be pretty terrible, all things considered. I think most people would think that would be terrible. But more like, if you had to choose some form of immortality, of living forever, that wouldn't be a bad limit to put on it, because you wouldn't really want to live forever. Just a very long time. I want to see how far our species can go with respect to things like technology, science, exploration. What do we do in the future? How many planets can we possibly destroy as a species? Or perhaps, God forbid, like stop destroying things and then maybe perhaps live in equilibrium with our environment, the various environments within which we choose to inhabit. That would be super nice. But that's a ramble. Let's go to the book reading scene. We wished. Here we go. I'm gonna have to come up with new thumbnails soon. New book covers and posters for my room. All right, here we go. Stand up, adjust myself. Oh, lift up the chair. The damn thing is sneaky and it keeps shrinking. It keeps sinking. All right. Okay, where are we? Chapter 21, Ben Weatherstaff. One of the strange things about living in the world is that it is only now and then one is quite sure one is going to live forever and ever and ever. One knows it sometimes when one gets up at the tender solemn dawn time and goes out and stands alone and throws one's head far back and looks up and watches the pale sky slowly changing and flushing and marvelous unknown things happening until the east almost makes one cry out and one's heart stands still at the strange unchanging majesty of the rising sun, which has been happening every morning for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. One knows it then for a moment or so. And one knows it sometimes when one stands by oneself in a wood at sunset and the mysterious deep gold stillness slanting through and under the branches seems to be saying slowly, again and again, something one cannot quite hear, however much one tries. Then sometimes the immense quiet of the dark blue at night with millions of stars waiting and watching makes one sure, and sometimes a sound of far-off music makes it true, and sometimes a look in someone's eyes. And it was like that with Cullen when he first saw and heard and felt the springtime inside the four high walls of a hidden garden. That afternoon, the whole world seemed to devote itself to being perfect and radiantly beautiful and kind to one boy. Perhaps out of pure heavenly goodness, the spring came and crowded everything it possibly could into that one place. More than once Dickon paused in what he was doing and stood still with a sort of growing wonder in his eyes, shaking his head softly. "Hey, it is gradely," he said. "I'm 12 going on 13, and there's a lot of afternoons in 13 years, but seems to me like I never seed one as gradely as this year." He thinks he's old. That's cute. "Aye, it is a gradely one," said Mary, and she sighed for mere joy. "I'll warrant it's the gradeliest one as ever was in this world." "Does the think," said Cullen with a dreamy carefulness, "as happened it was made likely that this ear all purpose for me, "My word," cried Mary admiringly. "That there is a bit of good Yorkshire, that her shapen first rate, that art, that tha art." And delight reigned. It says no one understood each other. They just assumed the best. I mean, they drew the chair under the plum tree, which was snow white with blossoms and musical with bees. It was like a king's canopy, a fairy king's. There were flowering cherry trees near, and apple trees whose buds were pink and white, and here and there one had burst open wide. Between the blossoming branches of the canopy, bits of blue sky looked down like wonderful eyes. creepy-ass eyes, I imagine. Mary and Dickon worked a little here and there, and Cullen watched them. They brought him things to look at, buds which were opening, buds which were tight closed, bits of twig whose leaves were just showing green, the feather of a woodpecker which had dropped on the grass, the empty shell of some bird early hatched. Dickon pushed the chairs slowly round and round the garden, stopping every other moment to let him look at wonders springing out of the earth or trailing down from trees. It was like being taken in state round the country of a magic king and queen and shown all the mysterious riches it contained. "I wonder if we shall see the robin," said Colin. "Thou'll see him often enough after a bit," answered Dickon. "When the eggs hatches out the little chap, he'll be kept so busy it'll make his head swim. That'll see him flying back and forward, carrying worms nigh as big as himself, and that much noise going on in the nest when he gets there as fair flusters him, so he scarce knows which big mouth to drop the first piece in. And gaping beaks and squawks on every side. Mother says, as when she sees the work a robin has to keep them gaping beaks filled, she feels like she was a lady with nothing to do. She says she's seen the little chaps when it seemed like the sweat must be dropping off 'em, though folk can't see it." This made them giggle so delightedly that they were obliged to cover their mouths with their hands, remembering that they must not be heard. Cullen had been instructed as to the law of whispers and low voices several days before. He liked the mysteriousness of it and did his best, but in the midst of excited enjoyment it is rather difficult never to laugh above a whisper. Every moment of the afternoon was full of new things, and every hour the sunshine grew more golden. The wheeled chair had been drawn back under the canopy, and Dickon had sat down on the grass and had just drawn out his pipe when Cullen saw something he had not had time to notice before. "That's a very old tree over there, isn't it?" he said. Dickon looked across the grass at the tree, and Mary looked, and there was a brief moment of stillness. "Yes," answered Dickon after it, and his low voice had a very gentle sound. Mary gazed at the tree and thought, "The branches are quite grey, and there's not a single leaf anywhere." Cullen went on, "It's quite dead, isn't it?" "Aye," admitted Dickon, "but them roses as has climbed all over it will near hide every bit of the dead wood when they're full o' leaves and flowers. It won't look dead then. It'll be the prettiest of all." Mary still gazed at the tree and thought, "It looks as if a big branch had been broken off," said Cullen. "I wonder how it was done." "It's been done many a year," answered Dickon. With a sudden relieved start and laying his hand on Cullen. "Look at that robin, there he is. He's been foraging for his mate." Cullen was almost too late, but he just caught sight of him, the flash of red-breasted bird with something in his beak. He darted through the greenness and into the close-grown corner and was out of sight. Cullen leaned back on his cushion again, laughing a little. "He's taking her tea to her. Perhaps it's 5 o'clock. I think I'd like some tea myself." And so they were safe. "It was magic which sent the robin," said Mary secretly to Dickon afterward. "I know it was magic." For both she and Dickon had been afraid Cullen might ask something about the tree whose branch had broken off 10 years ago, and they had talked it over together, and Dickon had stood and rubbed his head in a troubled way. We mun look as if we wasn't no different from the other trees," he had said. "We couldn't never tell him how it broke, poor lad. If he says anything about it, we mun try to look cheerful. For those who are uncertain, that's likely the tree whose branch, whence it broke, caused the accident which killed Cullen's mother after his birth. Well, certainly not before his birth, I guess." "Aye, that we mun. Mun means must," had answered Mary. but she had not felt as if she had looked cheerful when she gazed at the tree. She wondered and wondered in those few moments if there was any reality in that other thing Dickon had said. He had gone on rubbing his rust-red hair in a puzzled way, but a nice, comforted look had begun to grow in his blue eyes. Mrs. Craven was a very lovely young lady, he had gone on rather hesitatingly, and mother she thinks maybe she's about Misselwaith many a time looking after Master Cullen, same as all mothers do when they're looking out of the world. They have to come back, that sees. Happen she's been in the garden, and happen it was her set us to work and told us to bring him here. Very optimistic. Mary had thought he meant something about magic. She was a great believer in magic. Secretly, she quite believed that Dickon worked magic, of course good magic, on everything near him, and that was why people liked him so much, and wild creatures knew he was their friend. She wondered, indeed, if it were not possible that his gift had brought the robin just at the right moment when Cullen asked that dangerous question. She felt that his magic was working all the afternoon and making Cullen look like an entirely different boy. It did not seem possible that he could be the crazy creature who had screamed and beaten and bitten his pillow. Even his ivory whiteness seemed to change. The faint glow of color which had shone on his face and neck and hands when he first got inside the garden really never quite died away. He looked as if he were made of flesh instead of ivory or wax. Or you could just, say you don't know. You could just say you don't know. Yeah, it's a tree with a broken branch. Looks like it's dead. Probably why the branch broke. Oh, look, roses. They saw the robin carry food to his mate 2 or 3 times. It was so suggestive. It was so suggestive. Blah, blah, blah. Lying is bad. Yeah, I mean, lying is bad, but sometimes it's okay to be bad. Sometimes. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, obviously you would tell him at some point. But at the same time, by another token, they're completely lying about being in the secret garden in the first place. So, you know, this book's not really about being honest, is it? It's a big-ass word coming up. Scary stuff. Mind you, I'm having trouble with a suggestive. So, it's probably going to be a rough night. Anyhow, where were we? They saw the robin carry food to his mate 2 or 3 times, and it was so suggestive of afternoon tea that Cullen felt they must have some. Go and make one of the men servants bring some in a basket to the rhododendron. It's like a shape, the rhododendron walk, he said, and then you and Dickon can bring it here. It was an agreeable idea, easily carried out, and when the white cloth was spread upon the grass with hot tea and buttered toast and crumpets, a delightfully hungry meal was eaten, and several birds on domestic errands paused to inquire what was going on and were led into investigating crumbs with great activity. Nut and shell whisked up trees with pieces of cake, and Soot took the entire half of a buttered crumpet into a corner and pecked at and examined and turned it over and made hoarse remarks about it until he decided to swallow it all joyfully in one gulp. That's a flower. Oh, okay, the rhododendron. I hate people. Why do you come up with names like this? I also just remembered that Soot was the bird. I think Soot was the bird. Nut and shell are squirrels. Yeah, they're squirrels. These are names of creatures who took some food and ate them. The afternoon was dragging toward its mellow hour. Soot is a crow. Yeah. What did I say? It's totally the same thing. The sun was deepening the gold of its lances. The bees were going home and the birds were flying past less often. Dickon and Mary were sitting on the grass. The tea basket was repacked, ready to be taken back to the house, and Cullen was lying against his cushions with his heavy locks pushed back from his forehead, and his face looking quite a natural color. "I don't want this afternoon to go," he said, "but I shall come back tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after, and the day after." "You get plenty of fresh air, won't you?" said Mary. "I am going to get nothing else," he answered. "I have seen the spring now, and I'm going to see the summer. I'm going to see everything grow here. I'm going to grow here myself." "Ah, that thou will," said Dickon. "I shall have thee walking about in here and digging the same as other folk afore long." Cullen flushed tremendously. "Walk," he said. "Dig. Shall I?" I may have not, I don't know his emotion here. Flushed tremendously. Is he outraged that it be suggested that he work in the dirt? Or is he excited that these ideas are new to him and he didn't? Yeah, okay. Dickon's glance at him was delicately cautious. Neither he nor Mary had ever asked if anything was the matter with his legs. Excited, yeah. "For sure thou will," he said stoutly. That's got legs o' thine own, same as other folks." Mary was rather frightened until she heard Cullen's answer. "Nothing really ails them," he said, "but they are so thin and weak. They shake so that I'm afraid to try to stand on them." You imagine living like that. That is not something within my envelope of experience. Both Mary and Dickon drew a relieved breath. "When this stops being afraid, that'll stand on 'em," Dickon said with renewed cheer. "And that'll stop being afraid in a bit." "I shall," said Cullen, and he lay still as if he were wondering about things. They were really very quiet for a little while. The sun was dropping lower. It was that hour when everything stills itself, and they really had had a busy and exciting afternoon. Cullen looked as if he were resting luxuriously. Even the creatures had ceased moving about and had drawn together and were resting near them. Soot had perched on a low branch and drawn up one leg and dropped the gray film drowsily over his eyes. Mary privately thought he looked as if he might snore in a minute. In the midst of this stillness, it was rather startling when Cullen half lifted his head and exclaimed in a loud, suddenly alarmed whisper, "Who is that man?" Dickon and Mary scrambled to their feet. "Man," they both cried in low, quick voices. Cullen pointed to the high wall. "Look," he whispered excitedly. "Just look." Mary and Dickon wheeled about and looked. There was Ben Weatherstaff's indignant face glaring at them over the wall from the top of a ladder. He actually shook his fist at Mary. "If I wasn't a bachelor, a bachelder? It's bachelder. If I wasn't a bachelder, and thou was a wretch o' mine," he cried, "I'd give thee a hiding." He mounted another step threateningly, as if it were his energetic intention to jump down and deal with her. But as she came toward him, he evidently thought better of it, and stood on the top step of his ladder, shaking his fist down at her. "I never thought much o' thee," he harangued. "I couldn't abide thee in first time I set eyes on thee, a scrawny, buttermilk-faced young besom. Alas, asking questions and poking the nose where it wasn't wanted. I guess that was not wanted. I never knowed that got so thick with me. If it hadn't been for the robin, drat him." "Ben Weatherstaff," called out Mary, finding her breath. She stood below him and called up to him with a sort of gasp. Ben Weatherstaff. It was the robin who showed me the way. Then it did seem as if Ben would scramble down on her side of the wall. He was so outraged. The The young baden, he called down at her, laying the badness on a robin. Not but what he's impotent. Oh dear God, not but what he's impudent enow for anything. Him shown thee the way. Him, the young knout. She could see his next words burst out because he was overpowered by curiosity. However, this world did that get in. However in this world did that get in? It was the robin who showed me the way, she protested obstinately. He didn't know if he was doing it, but he did. And I can't tell you from here while you're shaking your fist at me. He stopped shaking his fist very suddenly at that very moment, and his jaw actually dropped as he stared over her head at something he saw coming over the grass toward him. At the first sound of his torrent of words, Cullen had been so surprised that he had only sat up and listened, as if he were spellbound. But in the midst of it he had recovered himself and beckoned imperiously to Dickon. "Wheel me over there," he commanded. "Wheel me quite close and stop right in front of him. And this, if you please." This is what Ben Weatherstaff beheld, and which made his jaw drop. A wheeled chair with luxurious cushions and robes which came toward him, looking rather like some sort of state coach, because a young Rajah leaned back in it with royal command in his great black-rimmed eyes, and a thin white hand extended haughtily toward him. And it stopped right under Ben Weatherstaff's nose. It was really no wonder his mouth dropped open. "Do you know who I am?" demanded the Rajah. How Ben Weatherstaff stared. His red old eyes fixed themselves on what was before him as if he were seeing a ghost. He gazed and gulped a lump down his throat and did not say a word. "Do you know who I am?" demanded Cullen still more imperiously. "Answer." Ben Weatherstaff put his gnarled hand up and passed it over his eyes and over his forehead, and then he did answer in a queer, shaky voice. "Who art thou'rt?" "Who thou art," he said. "Aye, that I do. With thy mother's eyes staring at me out of that face. Lord knows how thou come here, but thou'rt the poor cripple." Cullen forgot that he had ever had a back. His face flushed scarlet and he sat bolt upright. "I am not a cripple," he cried out furiously. "I'm not." "He's not," cried Mary, almost shouting up the wall in her fierce indignation. "He's not got a lump as big as a pin. I looked, and there was nothing, and there was none there, not one." Ben Weatherstaff passed his hand over his forehead again and gazed as if he could never gaze enough. His hand shook and his mouth shook and his voice shook. He was an ignorant old man and a tactless old man, and he could only remember the things he had heard. Tha hasn't got a crooked back," he said hoarsely. "No," shouted Cullen. Tha hasn't got crooked legs," quavered Ben more hoarsely yet. It was too much. The strength which Cullen usually threw into his tantrums rushed through him now in a new way. Never yet had he been accused of crooked legs, even in whispers, and the perfectly simple belief in their existence which was revealed by Ben Weatherstaff's voice was more than Rajah flesh and blood could endure. His anger and insulted pride made him forget everything but his one moment and filled him with a power he had never known before, an almost unnatural strength. "Come here," she shouted to Dickon, and he actually began to tear the coverings off his lower limbs and disentangle himself. Come here this minute." Dickon was by his side in a second. Mary caught her breath in a short gasp and felt herself turn pale. "He can do it. He can do it. He can do it. He can," she gabbled over to herself under her breath as fast as ever she could. There was a brief, fierce scramble. The rugs were tossed on to the ground. Dickon held Cullen's arm. The thin legs were out. The thin feet were on the grass. Cullen was standing upright, upright, as straight as an arrow and looking strangely tall, his head thrown back and his strange eyes flashing lightning. "Look at me," he flung up at Ben Weatherstaff. "Just look at me. Just look at me." "He's as straight as I am," cried Dickon, "and he's as straight as any lad in Yorkshire." What Ben Weatherstaff did, Mary thought queer beyond measure. He choked and gulped, and suddenly tears ran down his weather-wrinkled cheeks as he struck his old hands together. He burst forth. "The lies folk tells. The art as thin as a lath and as white as a wraith, but there's not a knob on thee. That'll make a mon yet. God bless thee." Dickon held Cullen's arm strongly, but the boy had not begun to falter. He stood straighter and looked at Ben Weatherstaff in the face. "I am your master," he said. "When my father is away, you are to obey me. This is my garden. Don't dare to say a word about it. You get down from that ladder and go out to the long walk, and Miss Mary will meet you and bring you here. I want to talk to you. We did not want you, but now you will have to be in the secret. Be quick." Ben Weatherstaff's crabbed old face was still wet with that one queer rush of tears. It seemed as if he could not take his eyes from thin, straight Cullen standing on his feet with his head thrown back. "Eh, lad," he almost whispered. "Eh, my lad." And then remembered himself. He suddenly touched his hat gardener fashion and said, yes, sir," and obediently disappeared as he descended the ladder. Chapter 22. When the sun went down. An unusual event, I'm sure. When his head was out of sight, Cullen turned to Mary. "Go and meet him," he said, and Mary flew across the garden to the door under the ivy. Dickon was watching him with sharp eyes. There were scarlet spots on his cheeks, and he looked amazed, but he showed no signs of falling. "I can stand," he said, and his head was still held up, and he said it quite grandly. "I told thee that could, as soon as thou stopped being afraid," answered Dickon, "and thou's stopped." "Yes, I've stopped," said Cullen. Then suddenly he remembered something Mary had said. "Are you making magic?" he asked sharply. Dickon's curly mouth spread in a cheerful grin. "Thou's doing magic thyself," he said. "It's same magic as made these here work out of the earth." And he touched with his thick boot a clump of crocuses in the grass. Cullen looked down at them. "Aye," he said slowly. "There couldn't be a bigger magic than that there. There couldn't be. There could not be." He drew himself up straighter than ever. "I'm going to walk to that tree," he said, pointing to one a few feet away from him. "I'm going to be standing when Weatherstaff comes here. I can rest against the tree if I like. When I want to sit down, I will sit down, but not before. Bring a rug from the chair." He walked to the tree, and though Dickon held his arm, he was wonderfully steady. When he stood against the tree trunk, it was not too plain that he supported himself against it, and he still held himself so straight that he looked tall. When Ben Weatherstaff came through the door in the inner wall, he saw him standing there, and he heard Mary muttering something under her breath. "What art thou saying?" he asked rather testily, because he did not want his attention distracted from the long, thin, straight boy figure and proud face. But she did not tell him what she was saying. What she was saying was this: "You can do it. You can do it. I told you you could. You can do it. You can do it. You can." She was saying it to Cullen because she wanted to make magic and keep him on his feet looking like that. She could not bear that he should give in before Ben Weatherstaff. He did not give in. She was uplifted by a sudden feeling that he looked quite beautiful in spite of his thinness. He fixed his eyes on Ben Weatherstaff in his funny, imperious way. "Look at me," he commanded. "Look at me all over. Am I a hunchback? Have I got crooked legs?" Ben Weatherstaff had not quite got over his emotion, but he had recovered a little and answered almost in his usual way. "Not tha," he said. "Nowt o' tha sort. What's tha been doing with thyself? Hadn't out o' sight and letting folk think thou was a cripple and a half-witted." "Half-witted," said Colin angrily. "Who thought that? Lots o' fools," said Ben. "The world's full o' jackasses braying, and they never bray nowt but lies." What did thou shut thyself up for?" "Everyone thought I was going to die," said Colin shortly. "I'm not." And he said it with such decision, Ben Weatherstaff looked him over, up and down and up. "The die," he said with dry exultation. "Nowt o' this sort. That's got too much pluck in thee. When I see thee pull thy legs on the ground in such a hurry, I knowed thou was all right. Sit thee down on the rug a bit, young master, and give me thy orders." There was a queer mixture of crabbed tenderness and shrewd understanding in his manner. Mary had poured out speech as rapidly as she could as they had come down the long walk. The chief thing to be remembered, she had told him, was that Colin was getting well. Getting well. The garden was doing it. No one must let him remember about having humps and dying. The Rajah condescended to seat himself on a rug under the tree. "What work do you do in the gardens, Weatherstaff?" he inquired. "Anything I'm told to do," answered old Ben. "I'm kept on by favour because she liked me." "She?" said Colin. "The mother," answered Ben Weatherstaff. "My mother?" said Colin, and he looked about him quietly. This was her garden, wasn't it? Aye, it was that. And Ben Weatherstaff looked about him too. She were main fond of it. "It is my garden now. I am fond of it. I shall come here every day," announced Colin. "But it is to be a secret. My orders are that no one is to know that we come here. Dickon and my cousin have worked and made it come alive. I shall send for you sometimes to help, but you must come when no one can see you." Ben Weatherstaff's face twisted itself in a dry, old smile. "I've come here before when no one saw me," he said. "What?" exclaimed Colin. "When?" "The last time I was here," rubbing his chin and looking around, "was about 2 years ago." "But no one has been in it for 10 years, cried Colin. "There was no door." "I'm no one," said Ben dryly, "and I didn't come through the door. I come over the wall. The rheumatics held me back the last 2 year. "Tha come and did a bit o' pruning," cried Dickon. "I couldn't make out how it had been done." "She was so fond of it, she was," said Ben Weatherstaff slowly. "And she was such a pretty young thing. She says to me once, 'Ben,' she says, laughing, 'if ever I am ill, or if I go away, you must take care of my roses.' When she did go away, the orders was no one was to ever come nigh. But I come. With grumpy obstinacy, over the wall I come, until the rheumatics stopped me, and I did a bit of work once a year. She'd gave her order first. It wouldn't have been as wick. Oh, right, live. Wick means live. It wouldn't have been as wick as it is if I hadn't done it," said Dickon. "I did wonder." "I'm glad you did it, Weatherstaff," said Colin. "You'll know how to keep the secret." "Aye, I'll know, sir," answered Ben, "and it'll be easier for a man with rheumatics to come in at the door." On the grass near the tree, Mary had dropped her trowel. Now here's another question. He knows where the door is. The door didn't move when it was grown over. He could have broken that lock, I bet. On the grass near the tree, Mary had dropped her trowel. Cullen stretched out his hand and took it up. An odd expression came into his face, and he began to scratch at the earth. His thin hand was weak enough, but presently, as they watched him, Mary, with quite breathless interest, he drove the end of the trowel into the soil and turned some over. But someone might see it was broken, mainly the master. I don't think Mr. Craven has seen the door in 10 years. That I believe. You can do it. You can do it, said Mary to herself. I tell you, you can. So Mary is now into casting spells to herself. Okay. Dickon's round eyes were full of eager curiousness, but he had said not a word. Ben Weatherstaff looked on with interested face. Cullen persevered. After he had turned a few trowelfuls of soil, he spoke exultantly to Dickon in his best Yorkshire. "Tha said as tha'd have me walking about here same as the other folk, and thou said tha'd have me digging. I thought thou was just leeing to please me. This is only the first day, and I've walked. And here I am digging." His Yorkshire is better than mine, I'll say that. Ben Weatherstaff's mouth fell open again when he heard him, but he ended by chuckling. "Eh," he said, "that sounds as if tha'd got wits enow. Thou'rt a Yorkshire lad for sure, and thou'rt digging too. How'd thou like to plant a bit of something? I can get thee a rose in a pot." "Go and get it," said Cullen, digging excitedly. "Quick, quick." It was done quick. Now, here's another question. It's getting late, right? Is the rest of the staff not concerned about the whereabouts of the young master of the house? I know he gave orders, but they still answer to his father. It was done quickly enough indeed. Ben Weatherstaff went his way, forgetting rheumatics. Dickon took his spade and dug the hole deeper and wider than a new digger with thin white hands could make it. Mary slipped out to run and bring back a watering can. When Dickon had deepened the hole, Cullen went on, turning the soft earth over and over. He looked up at the sky, flushed and glowing with a strangely new exercise, slight as it was. "I want to do it before the sun goes quite down," he said. Mary thought that perhaps the sun held back a few minutes just on purpose. Ben Weatherstaff brought the rose in its pot from the greenhouse. He hobbled over the grass as fast as he could. He had begun to be excited too. He knelt down by the hole and broke the pot from the mold. "Here, lad," he said, handing the plant to Cullen. "Set it in the earth thyself, same as the king does when he goes to a new place." The thin white hands shook a little, and Cullen's flush grew deeper as he set the rose in the mold and held it while Ben made firm the earth. It was filled in and pressed down and made steady. Mary was leaning forward on her hands and knees. Soot had flown down and marched forward to see what was being done. Nut and Shell chattered about it from a cherry tree. "It's planted," said Cullen at last, "and the sun is only slipping over the edge. Help me up, Dickon. I want to be standing when it goes. That's part of the magic." And Dickon helped him, and the magic, or whatever it was, so gave him strength that when the sun did slip over the edge and end the strange, lovely afternoon for them, there he actually stood on his 2 feet, laughing. It's the end of that chapter. We are like 5 minutes out from ads, and I think it's a good time to take a little break. So we're going to preemptively trigger those and take a short 3-minute break. Almost flipped over to the gaming stream. Can't have that. I did a quick change. I'm into more comfy pajamas. I draw the line at wearing pajamas to work. Probably not going to be looked on properly or favorably. Let's see. Chapter 23. Magic. Dr. Craven had been waiting for some time at the house when they returned to it. He had indeed begun to wonder if it might not be wise to send someone out to explore the garden paths. When Colin was brought back to his room, the poor man looked him over seriously. "You should not have stayed so long," he said. "You must not overexert yourself." "I am not tired at all," said Colin. "It has made me well. Tomorrow I am going out in the morning as well as in the afternoon." "I am not sure that I can allow it," answered Dr. Craven. "I am afraid it would not be wise." "It would not be wise to try to stop me," said Colin quite seriously. "I am going." Even Mary had found out that one of Colin's chief peculiarities was that he did not know in the least what a rude little brute he was, with his way of ordering people about. "Oh, wow, a raid, holy cow. Vexing Cat, thank you for coming by. I hope you had a pleasant stream. Thank you for bringing your huge community here. Welcome, everybody." That is read and raid. I do like that. That's a nice, simple raiding message. Greetings, everybody. My name is Sidoen. I last stopped into Vexing Cat's stream a little while ago, and she had uncertainties about how to pronounce my name. Well, Vexing Cat, you did very well. You got my name correct. Well done. We celebrated. Yeah, reading is awesome. Yeah, and again, welcome. I am the librarian of my library. I read on Mondays. I game on Fridays and Sundays. Wednesday is a bit of a misnomer. We used to read on Wednesdays. We might read again some other day. Right now we are playing Monster Hunter Wilds on Wednesdays. Thank you for the follow. Yeah. Wilds on Wednesdays, Space Marine 2 on Fridays and Sundays. Yeah, there's the alerts. I do have them muted for reading streams, though. It is I do use ASMR as a tag. I want to at least respect that to some degree. I haven't moved to Thursdays yet. I am thinking of moving Wednesday streams to Thursday streams, though, yes. Booktubers. It's a nice name. I like that name. We are currently reading The Secret Garden. We've just started chapter, what was it, 22? Did I say 22? Yeah, 23, sorry. We are nearly done. There's only a few more chapters to go. All of these chapters, though, they are stored on my YouTube channel. If you're interested in listening to the rest of them, they're over there as well. Yeah. Well, Vex, if you need to go, take care of yourself. Give yourself some after stream care. I highly encourage it. Again, thank you for coming by. Everybody else, the same too. If you've been listening to a long time, yeah, go eat. Go have a snack. Go have a snack. The cat's favorite thing to do. It's a nap, and then it's the cat. Sorry, it's the cat. It's the snack, but also the cat. Hydrate. Thank you for the hydrate. Water. It's good for you. Right. Snack and nap. Yep. That's a human's favorite thing to do, too. Dinner and snooze. Let us continue. Colin is talking to Dr. Craven, who is encouraging him to not overexert himself. We have just gotten back from a day in the secret garden. "It would not be wise to try to stop me," said Colin quite seriously. "I am going." Even Mary had found out that one of Colin's chief peculiarities was that he did not know in the least what a rude little brute he was with his way of ordering people about. He had lived on a sort of desert island all his life, and as he had been the king of it, he had made his own manners and had had no one to compare himself with. Mary had indeed been rather like him herself, and since she had been at Misselwaith, had gradually discovered that her own manners had not been of the kind which is usual or popular. Having made this discovery, she naturally thought of it. Having made this discovery, she naturally thought of enough interest to communicate to Colin. So she sat and looked at him curiously for a few minutes, after Dr. Craven had gone. She wanted to make him ask her why she was doing it, and of course she did. "What are you looking at me for?" he said. "I'm thinking that I am rather sorry for Dr. Craven." "So am I," said Colin calmly, but not without an air of some satisfaction. "He won't get Misselwaith at all now that I'm not going to die." "I'm sorry for him because of that, of course," said Mary, "but I was thinking just then that it must have been very horrid to have had to be polite for 10 years to a boy who was always rude. I would never have done it." "Am I rude?" Colin inquired undisturbedly. "If you had been his own boy, and he had been a slappin' sort of man," said Mary, "he would have slapped you." "But he daren't," said Colin. "No, he daren't," answered Mistress Mary, thinking the thing out quite without prejudice. "Nobody ever dared to do anything you didn't like, because you were going to die, and things like that. You were such a poor thing." "But," announced Colin stubbornly, "I am not going to be a poor thing. I won't let people think I'm one. I stood on my own feet this afternoon." "It is always having your own way that has made you so queer," Mary went on, thinking aloud. Colin turned his head, frowning. "Am I queer?" he demanded. "Yes." Mary's forthright at least. "Yes," answered Mary. "Very. But you needn't be cross," she added impartially, "because I am so queer, and so is Ben Weatherstaff. But I am not as queer as I was before I began to like people and before I found the garden." "I don't want to be queer," said Colin. "I'm not going to be." And he frowned again with determination. "For the record, everybody, the book I'm reading is incredibly old, and queer simply means strange or unusual. That's all." He was a very proud boy. He lay thinking for a while, and then Mary saw his beautiful smile begin and gradually change his whole face. I shall stop being queer," he said. If I go every day to the garden, there is magic in there, good magic, you know, Mary. I am sure there is." "So am I," said Mary. "Even if it isn't real magic," Colin said, "we can pretend it is. Something is there, something." "It's magic," said Mary, "but not black. It's as white as snow." They always called it magic, and indeed it seemed like in the months that followed, the wonderful months, the radiant months, the amazing ones. Oh, the things which happened in that garden. If you have never had a garden, you cannot understand. And if you have had a garden, you will know what it would take that it would take a whole book to describe all that came to pass there. Okay, side note, this is a book. At first it seemed that green things would never cease pushing their way through the earth, in the grass, in the beds, even in the crevices of the walls. Then the green things began to show buds, and the buds began to unfurl and show color, every shade of blue, every shade of purple, every tint and hue of crimson. In its happy days, flowers had been tucked away into every inch and hole and corner. Ben Weatherstaff had seen it done, and had himself scraped out mortar from between the bricks of the wall and made pockets of earth for lovely clinging things to grow on. Iris and white lilies rose out of the grass in sheaves, and the green alcoves filled themselves with amazing armies of the blue and white flower lances of the delphiniums, or the columbines, or the campanulas. Yep, not going to retry that word. I think I did really well. There's like 3 huge ass words right there. We got them. Bang, bang, bang. Good stuff. She was main fond of them, she was, Ben Weatherstaff said. She liked them things as was Alus pointing up to the blue sky, she used to tell. Not as she was one of them, she looked down on the earth, not her. She just loved it, but she said as the blue sky Alus looked so joyful. I don't know what an Alus is. Olus? It's probably Olus, yes. The seeds Dickon and Mary had planted grew as if fairies had tended them. Satiny poppies of all tints danced in the breeze by the score, gaily defying flowers which had lived in the garden for years, and which might be confessed seemed rather to wonder how such new people had got there. And the roses, rising out of the grass tangled round the sundial, wreathed the tree trunks and hanging from their branches, climbing up the walls and spreading over them with long garlands falling in cascades. They came alive day by day, hour by hour. Fair fresh leaves and buds, tiny at first, but swelling and working magic until they burst and uncurled into cups of scent, delicately spilling themselves over their brims and filling the garden air. Cullen saw it all, watching each change as it took place. Every morning he was brought out, and every hour of each day when it didn't rain he spent in the garden. Even gray days pleased him. He would lie on the grass watching things grow, he said. If you watched long enough, he declared, you could see buds unsheath themselves. Also, you could make the acquaintance of strange, busy insect things running about on various unknown but evidently serious errands, sometimes carrying tiny scraps of straw or feather or food, or climbing blades of grass as if they were trees from whose tops one could look out to explore the country. It was a game like that. A mole throwing up its mound at the end of its burrow, and making its way out at last with the long nailed paws which looked like elfish hands. Excuse me. Was that calendula? Oh, okay. Lovely yellow and orange flowers, aka marigolds. Oh, okay. Why can't they just say marigolds? I can pronounce marigolds. They should know better. Long-nailed paws. yeah. Long-nailed paws, which looked so like elfish hands, had absorbed him one whole morning. Ants' ways, beetles' ways, bees' ways, frogs' ways, birds' ways, plant ways gave him a new world to explore, and when Dickon revealed them all and added foxes' ways, otters' ways, ferrets' ways, squirrels' ways, and trouts and water rats and badgers' ways, there was no end to the things to talk about and think over. Reminds me of when I was younger. We didn't have an internet, there was no such thing. Personal computers were a fantasy that we only saw on, what was that talk show once? No, sorry, not a talk show. One of the, damn, you can see it in my head. Yeah, they're literally touching grass. There was, what was that show that's part of that genre with a guy in it? That one. My God, I can literally see the face in my head, but none of this is coming to me. Sorry, there are no words. All the words are in this book. We'll move on now. Just cut that section out of your brain. Don't need that. As this was not the half of the magic, the fact that he had really once stood on his feet had set Cullen thinking tremendously, and when Mary told him of the spell she had worked, he was excited and approved of it greatly. He talked of it constantly. Of course there must be lots of magic in the world, he said wisely one day, but people don't know what it is like or how to make it. Perhaps the beginning is just to say nice things are going to happen until you make them happen. I'm going to try an experiment. Why can't all rich people think like that? That would be fantastic. No, not a documentary. No, it's like a comedy, right, for the family. And it's like of another family in circumstances and stuff. And it's older style of show. I don't think it would do really well today. Come on, the word is like a sitcom. Thank you for so yes. Sorry, my brain no work good. sitcoms, tons of them back in the day, and they're like Family Ties. I think that's one with that kid in it, who is definitely not a kid today, but yes, he had literally situational comedies, yeah, but family stuff. Yeah. The next morning, when they went to the secret garden, he sent at once for Ben Weatherstaff. Michael J. Fox. Yes, thank you. That's the name. Stop interrupting the story, damn it. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that. I appreciate your memory. My wife, everybody, Valana, she is my memory. The next morning, when they went to the secret garden, he sent at once for Ben Weatherstaff. Ben came as quickly as he could and found the Raja standing on his feet under a tree and looking very grand, but also very beautifully smiling. "Good morning, Ben Weatherstaff," he said. "I want you and Dickon and Miss Mary to stand in a row and listen to me, because I am going to tell you something very important." That sounds very imperious. "Aye, aye, sir," answered Ben Weatherstaff, touching his forehead. One of the long-concealed charms of Ben Weatherstaff was that in his boyhood he had once run away to sea and had made voyages, so he could reply like a sailor. "I am going to try a scientific experiment," explained the Raja. "When I grow up, I am going to make great scientific discoveries, and I am going to begin now with this experiment." "Aye, aye, sir," said Ben Weatherstaff promptly, though this was the first time he had heard of great scientific discoveries. It was the first time Mary had heard of them either, but even at this stage she had begun to realize that, queer as he was, Cullen had read about a great many singular things, and was somehow a very convincing sort of boy. When he held up his hand and fixed his strange eyes on you, it seemed as if you believed him almost in spite of yourself, though he was only 10 years old, going on 11. At this moment, he was especially convincing because he suddenly felt the fascination of actually making a sort of speech like a grown-up person. "The great scientific discoveries I am going to make," he went on, "will be about magic. Magic is a great thing, and scarcely anyone knows anything about it except a few people in old books, and Mary a little, because she was born in India, where there are fakirs. I believe Dickon knows some magic, but perhaps he doesn't know he knows it. He charms animals and people. I would never have let him come to see me if he had not been an animal charmer, which is a boy charmer too, because a boy is an animal. I am sure there is magic in everything, only we have not sense enough to get hold of it and make it do things for us, like electricity and horses and steam." This sounded so imposing that Ben Weatherstaff became quite excited and really could not keep still. Yeah, children logics. There's like, I think when I was younger, I had many similar thoughts. I'm sure many people in human history had kind of similar thoughts. Many things like ether. Ether was a serious scientific hypothesis for a while there until they disproved it. That kind of thing was pursued in all seriousness. See, Ben Weatherstaff could not keep still. See, "Aye, aye, sir," he said, and began to stand up quite straight. When Mary found this garden, it looked quite dead," the orator proceeded. "Then something began pushing things up out of the soil and making things out of nothing. One day things weren't there, and another they were. I had never watched things before, and it made me feel very curious. Scientific people are always curious, and I am going to be scientific. I keep saying that to myself. What is it? What is it? It's something. It can't be nothing. I don't know its name, so I call it magic." That sounds very, very human. "I have never seen the sun rise, but Mary and Dickon have, and from what they tell me, I'm sure that is magic too. Something pushes it up and draws it up. Sometimes, since I've been in the garden, I have looked up and through the trees at the sky, and I have had a strange feeling of being happy, as if something were pushing and drawing in my chest and making me breathe fast. Magic is always pushing and drawing and making things out of nothing. Everything is made out of magic. Leaves and trees, flowers and birds, badgers and foxes and squirrels and people. So it must be all around us, in this garden, in all the places. The magic in this garden has made me stand up, and I know I am going to live to be a man. I am going to make the scientific experiment of trying to get some, and put it in myself, and make it push and draw me and make me strong. I don't know how to do it, but I think that if you keep thinking about it and calling it, perhaps it will come. Perhaps that is the first baby way to get it. When I was going to try to stand that first time, Mary kept saying it to herself as fast as she could. You can do it. You can do it. And I did. I had to try myself at the same time, of course, but her magic helped me. And so did Dickens. Every morning and evening, and as often in the daytime as I can remember, I am going to say, magic is in me. Magic is making me well. I'm going to be as strong as Dickon, as strong as Dickon. You must all do it too. That is my experiment. Will you help, Ben Weatherstaff? Aye, sir, said Ben Weatherstaff. Aye, aye. The placebo effect is magic. Kind of really is. It's an amazing effect. If you keep doing it every day as regularly as soldiers go through drill, we shall see what will happen and find out if the experiment succeeds. You learn things by saying them over and over and thinking about them until they stay in your mind forever, and I think it will be the same with magic. If you keep calling it to come to you and help you, it will, and it will get to be a part of you, and it will stay and do things. I once heard an officer in India tell my mother that there were fakirs who said words over and over thousands of times, said Mary. Yeah, that and the power of positive thinking. And even said, you still have to do things too. Yeah, so they're going to say this thing over and over, but he's also going to be like exercising daily in the garden. So I think have some positive bias predictions. Still biased, though. I've heard Jem Fettleworth's wife say the same thing over thousands of times. Callin' Jem a drunken brute, said Ben Weatherstaff dryly. Summa at alles come o' that, sure enough. He gave her a good hiding and went to the Blue Lion and got as drunk as a lord. Colin drew his brows together and thought a few minutes. Then he cheered up. Well, he said, you see, something did come of it. She used the wrong magic until she made him beat her. Yeah, that's what happened. Yeah, that's not problematic at all. It's clearly her fault. Wow. If she'd used the right magic and had said something nice, perhaps he wouldn't have got as drunk as a lord, and perhaps he might have brought her a new bonnet. Yes, that's the equivalent of being beaten by your husband, is you get a new hat. World is a just place, of course. Thou'rt a clever lad, as well as a straight-legged one, Master Colin, he said. Next time I see Bess Fettleworth, I'll give her a bit o' a hint o' what magic will do for her. She be rare and pleased if thy scientific experiment worked, and so would Jem. Scientific experiment. Oh, sometimes these words are amusing, sometimes painful. Dickon had stood listening to the lecture, his round eyes shining with curious delight. Nut and shell were on his shoulders, and he held a long-eared white rabbit in his arm, and stroked it softly while it laid its ears along its back and enjoyed itself. Do you think the experiment will work? Colin asked him, wondering what he was thinking. He so often wondered what Dickon was thinking when he saw him looking at him, or at one of his creatures with his happy, wide smile. He smiled now, and his smile was wider than usual. Aye, he answered, that I do. It'll work same as the seas do when the sun shines on 'em. It'll work for sure. Shall us begin it now? Colin was delighted, and so was Mary. Fired by recollections of fakirs and devotees in the illustrations, Colin suggested that they should all sit cross-legged under the tree which made a canopy. "It will be like sitting in a sort of temple," said Colin. "I'm rather tired and I want to sit down." "Eh?" said Dickon. "Thou must begin by saying thou art tired. Thou might spoil the magic." Colin turned and looked at him into his innocent round eyes. "That's true," he said slowly. "I must only think of the magic." It all seemed most majestic and mysterious when they sat down in their circle. Ben Weatherstaff felt as if he had somehow been led into appearing at a prayer meeting. Ordinarily, he was very fixed in being what he called "again prayer meetings." Again prayer meetings, but this being the Raja's affair, he did not resent it, and was indeed inclined to be gratified at being called upon to assist. Mistress Mary felt solemnly enraptured. Dickon held his rabbit in his arm, and perhaps he made some charmer's signal no one heard, for when he sat down, cross-legged like the rest, the crow, the fox, the squirrel, and the lamb slowly drew near and made part of the circle, settling each into a place of rest as if of their own desire. "The creatures have come," said Colin gravely. "They want to help us." Or they just want to sit down. Maybe they just want to sit down. Colin really looked quite beautiful, Mary thought. He held his head high as if he felt like a sort of a priest, and his strange eyes had a wonderful look in them. The light shone on him through the tree canopy. "Now we will begin," he said. "Shall we sway backward and forward, Mary, as if we were dervishes?" "I cannot do no swaying back'ard and forward," said Ben Weatherstaff. "I've got the rheumatics." "The magic will take them away." Poor Ben. "The magic will take them away," said Colin in a high priest tone. "But we won't sway until it has done it. We will only chant." "I cannot do no chanting," said Ben Weatherstaff a trifle testily. "They turned me out of the church choir the only time I ever tried it." No one smiled. They were all too much in earnest. Colin's face was not even crossed by a shadow. He was thinking only of the magic. "Then I will chant," he said, and he began, looking like a strange boy spirit. "The sun is shining. The sun is shining. That is the magic. The flowers are growing. The roots are stirring. That is the magic. Being alive is the magic. Being strong is the magic. The magic is in me. The magic is in me. It is in me. It is in me. It's in every one of us. It's in Ben Weatherstaff's back. Magic. Magic, come and help." Does seem kind of, maybe he should have sat down and written a script first. He said it a great many times, not 1,000 times, but quite a goodly number. Mary listened entranced. She felt as if it were at once queer and beautiful, and she wanted him to go on and on. Ben Weatherstaff began to feel soothed into a sort of dream, which was quite agreeable. The humming of the bees in the blossoms mingled with the chanting voice and drowsily melted into a doze. Dickon sat cross-legged, with his rabbit asleep on his arm and a hand resting on the lamb's back. Soot had pushed away a squirrel and huddled close to him on his shoulder. The gray film dropped over his eyes. At last Colin stopped. "Now I am going to walk round the garden," he announced. Ben Weatherstaff's head had just dropped forward, and he lifted it with a jerk. "You have been asleep," said Colin. "Nowt o' the sort," mumbled Ben. "The sermon was good enough, but I am bound to get out afore the collection." He was not quite awake yet. "You're not in church," said Colin. "Not me," said Ben, straightening himself. "Who said I were? I heard every bit of it. You said the magic was in my back. The doctors call it rheumatics." The doctor calls it. The Raja waved his hand. "That was the wrong magic," he said. "You will get better. You have my permission to go to go to your work, but come back tomorrow. I'd like to see thee walk round the garden, grunted Ben. It was not an unfriendly grunt, but it was a grunt. In fact, being a stubborn old party and not having entire faith in magic, he had made up his mind that if he were sent away, he would climb his ladder and look over the wall so that he might be ready to hobble back if there were any stumbling. The Rajah did not object to his staying, and so the procession was formed. It really did look like a procession. Colin was at its head, with Dickon on one side and Mary on the other. Ben Weatherstaff walked behind, and the creatures trailed after them. The lamb and the fox cub keeping close to Dickon, the white rabbit hopping along or stopping to nibble, and Soot following with the solemnity of a person who felt himself in charge. It was a procession which moved slowly, but with dignity. Every few yards it stopped to rest. Cullen leaned on Dickon's arm, and privately Ben Weatherstaff kept a sharp lookout. But now and then Cullen took his hand from its support and walked a few steps alone. His head was held up all the time, and he looked very grand. The magic is in me, he kept saying. The magic is making me strong. I can feel it. I can feel it. It seemed very certain that something was upholding and uplifting him. He sat on the seats in the alcoves, and once or twice he sat down in the grass, and several times he paused in the path and leaned on Dickon, but he would not give up until he had gone all round the garden. When he returned to the canopy tree, his cheeks were flushed and he looked triumphant. I did it. The magic worked, he cried. That is my first scientific discovery. What will Dr. Craven say? Broke out Mary. He won't say anything, Colin answered, because he will be told. Because he will not be told. Yeah, because he will not be told. Sorry, words in order are apparently confusing now. This is to be the biggest secret of all. No one is to know anything about it until I've grown so strong that I can walk and run like any other boy. I shall come here every day in my chair, and I shall be taken back in it. I won't have people whispering and asking questions, and I won't let my father hear about it until the experiment has quite succeeded. Then, sometime when he comes back to Misselwaith, I shall just walk into his study and say, here I am. I am like any other boy. I am quite well, and I shall live to be a man. It has been done by a scientific experiment, and then your father will have a heart attack and think he's asleep. But it'll be a great heart attack. And what do you know? This Mary things do. He will think he is in a dream, cried Mary. He won't believe his eyes. Colin flushed triumphantly. He had made himself believe that he was going to get well, which was, really, more than half the battle, if he had been aware of it. And the thought which stimulated him more than any other was this imagining what his father would look like when he saw that he had a son who was as straight and strong as other fathers' sons. One of his darkest miseries in the unhealthy, morbid past days had been his hatred of being a sickly, weak-backed boy whose father was afraid to look at him. He'll be obliged to believe them, he said. One of the things I'm going to do after the magic works, and before I can begin to make scientific discoveries, is to be an athlete. That's a good ambition. That's a great ambition. We shall have thee taken to boxing in a week or so, said Ben Weatherstaff. That'll end we winning the belt, and being champion prize fighter of all England. Cullen fixed his eyes on him sternly. Weatherstaff, he said, that is disrespectful. You must not take liberties because you are in the secret. However much magic works, I shall not be a prize fighter. I shall be a scientific discoverer. Axe pardon, sir, answered Ben, touching his forehead in salute. I ought to have seed it wasn't a joking matter. But his eyes twinkled, and secretly he was immensely pleased. He really did not mind being snubbed, since the snubbing meant that the lad was gaining strength and spirit. Chapter 24. let them laugh. The secret garden was not the only one Dickon worked in. Round the cottage on the moor there was a piece of ground enclosed by a low wall of rough stones. Early in the morning and late in the fading twilight, and on all the days Colin and Mary did not see him, Dickon worked there, planting or tending potatoes and cabbages, turnips and carrots, and herbs for his mother. In the company of his creatures, he did wonders there and was never tired of doing them, it seemed. While he dug, or weeded, or whistled, or sang bits of Yorkshire moor songs, he talked to Soot or Captain, or the brothers and sisters he had taught to help him. "We'd never get on as comfortable as we do," Mrs. Salisbury said, "if it wasn't for Dickon's garden. Anything'll grow for him. His taters and cabbages is twice the size of anyone else's, and they've got a flavour with them as nobody's has." When she found a moment to spare, she liked to go out and talk to him. After supper, there was still a long, clear twilight to work in, and that was her quiet time. She could sit upon the low, rough wall and look on and hear stories of the day. She loved this time. There were not only vegetables in this garden. Dickon had bought penny packages of flower seeds now and then, and sown bright, sweet-scented things among the gooseberry bushes and even cabbages, and he grew borders of of things and pinks and pasies and things whose seeds he could save year after year, or whose roots would bloom each spring and spread in time into fine clumps. He grows a lot of different things, some of them with words I don't pronounce. Meganet. It's not Meganet. It's definitely not pronounced Meganet. But here we are. Where the hell was I? Fine clumps. The low wall was one of the prettiest things in Yorkshire, because he had tucked moorland foxglove and ferns and rockcress and hedgerow flowers into every crevice, until only here and there glimpses of the stones were to be seen. This very much reminds me of like organic gardening. Like one of the key features in like organic gardens or organically grown things is that the plants that are harvested are grown in and amongst other plants in a more sort of like organically, imagine like a forestry environment where there isn't just one plant planted row after row after row, but many different plants that supplement and just develop an environment that's more healthy for one another. "All a chap's got to do to make him thrive, Mother," he would say, "is to be friends with him for sure. They're just like the creatures. If they're thirsty, give 'em a drink, and if they're hungry, give 'em a bit o' food. They want to live same as we do. If they died, I should feel as if they'd been a bad lad and somehow treated them heartless, or if I'd been a bad lad and somehow treated them heartless." It was in these twilight hours that Mrs. Salisbury heard of all that had happened at Misselthwaite Manor. At first, she was only told that Mester Cullen had taken a fancy to going out into the grounds with Miss Mary, and that it was doing him good. But it was not long before it was agreed between the two children that Dickon's mother might come into the secret. Somehow, it was not doubted that she was safe for sure. So one beautiful, still evening, Dickon told the whole story, and with all the thrilling details of the buried key and the robin and the grey haze which had seemed like deadness and the secret Mistress Mary had planned never to reveal. The coming of Dickon and how it had been told to him, the doubt of Mester Cullen, and the final drama of his introduction to the hidden domain, combined with the incident of Ben Weatherstaff's angry face peering over the wall, and Mr. Cullen's sudden indignant strength, made Mrs. Salisbury's nice-looking face quite change color several times. "My word," she said, "it was a good thing that little lass came to the manor. It's been the making o' her and the saving o' him. Standing on his feet, and us all thinking he was a poor half-witted lad with not a straight bone in him." She asked a great many questions, and her blue eyes were full of deep thinking. What did they make of it at the manor? Him being so well and cheerful and never complaining, she inquired. They don't know what to make of it, answered Dickon. Every day as comes round his face looks different. It's filling out and doesn't look so sharp, and the waxy colour is going, but he has to do it. He has to do his bit of complaining. With a highly entertained grin. What for, in mercy's name? Asked Mrs. Soberry. Dickon chuckled. He does it to keep them from guessing what's happened. If the doctor knew he'd found out he could stand on his feet, he'd likely write and tell Mr. Craven. Mr. Cullen's saving the secret to tell himself. He's going to practice his magic on his legs every day until his father comes back, and then he's going to march into his room and show him he's as straight as other lads. But him and Miss Mary thinks it's best plan to do a bit of groaning and fretting now and then to throw folk off the scent. Mrs. Soberry was laughing a low, comfortable laugh long before he had finished his last sentence. "Eh," she said, "that pair's enjoying theirselves, I'll warrant. They'll get a good bit o' play acting out of it, and there's nothing children likes as much as play acting. Let's hear what they do, Dickon lad." Dickon stopped weeding and sat up on his heels to tell her. His eyes were twinkling with fun. "Mr. Cullen is carried down to his chair every time he goes out," he explained, "and he flies out at John, the footman, for not carrying him careful enough. He makes himself as helpless looking as he can, and never lifts his head until we're out of sight of the house, and he grunts and frets a good bit while he's being settled into his chair. Him and Miss Mary's both got to enjoying it, and when he groans and complains, she'll say, 'Poor Cullen, does it hurt you so much? Are you so weak as that, poor Cullen?' But the trouble is that sometimes they can scarce keep from bursting out laughing. When we get safe into the garden, they'll laugh till they've no breath left to laugh with. That can't be very quiet then, can it? And they have to stuff their faces into Mr. Cullen's cushions to keep the gardeners from hearing, if any of 'em's about." Do you want to make a bet that all the adults know exactly what's going on, and they're just keeping their mouths shut? Because, that's what happens with adults and children. Everything I've heard of, yeah, Mom knows, Dad knows, everyone in the family knows. Some likely, yeah, it's impossible to keep something like that a secret, right? "The more they laugh, the better for 'em," said Mrs. Soberry, still laughing herself. "Good, healthy children, laughing's better than pills any o' the day o' year. That pair'll plump up for sure." Back then, who knows about the pills? "They are plumping up," said Dickon. "They're that hungry they don't know how to get enough to eat without making talk. Mr. Cullen says if he keeps sending for more food, they won't believe he's an invalid at all. Miss Mary says she'll let him eat her share, but he says that if she goes hungry, she'll get thin and they mun both get fat at once." What a conundrum. That's a hell of a conversation to have in front of Dickon, who belongs in a house of, 14 people who barely have enough food to eat. Oh, hello, Mopile. Mopile? I can call you Mop. 15. "You love the secret garden, so I had to pop in to say that, as I have read the story twice." Wow. I rarely read a story twice, so you must really love this. By all means, we are reading the last few chapters. Please feel free to stick around and finish the book with us. Yeah, this is my first time reading the story. I've recorded it on YouTube if you would like to listen to it over and over again. Of course, you're very welcome to. And yeah, thank you for popping in. This is the original, not the abridged version. To be clear, Valana read this book once, longs ago, and she has identified a few passages in this telling that wasn't in her version of the book. So to be clear, apparently there are some versions out there. Where are we? Oh yes, they were talking about how to share the food to prevent suspicion. Mrs. Soberry laughed so heartily at the revelation of this difficulty that she quite rocked backward and forward in her blue cloak, and Dickon laughed with her. I'll tell thee what, lad, Mrs. Soberry said when she could speak. I've thought of a way to help them. When that goes to them in the mornings, thou shalt take a pail of good new milk, and I'll bake 'em a crusty cottage loaf or some buns with currants in 'em, same as you children like. Nothing's so good as fresh milk and bread. And then they could take off the edge of their hunger while they were in the garden, and the fine food they get indoors utter polish off the corners. Wow. She's going to feed 2 more children now, so 16 people. The poor people are going to feed 16 people now. Hey, mother, said Dickon admiringly. What a wonder thou art. Thou always sees a way out of things. They was quite in a pother yesterday. They didn't see how they was to manage without ordering up more food. They felt that empty inside. We barely have, so I'll send more food. Yeah, we barely have, so I'll send more food to the food-rich children. Well, it's a story, I guess. They're two young'uns growing fast and health's coming back to both of them. Children like that feels like young wolves, and food's flesh and blood to 'em, said Mrs. Soberry, and she smiled Dickon's own curving smile. Hey, but they're enjoying themselves for sure, she said. She was quite right, the comfortable, wonderful mother creature, and she had never been more so than when she said their play-acting would be their joy. Colin and Mary found it one of their most thrilling sources of entertainment. The idea of protecting themselves from suspicion had been unconsciously suggested to them, first by the puzzled nurse and then by Dr. Craven himself. Your appetite is improving very much, Master Cullen, the nurse had said one day. You used to eat nothing, and so many things disagreed with you. Nothing disagrees with me now, replied Cullen, and then seeing the nurse looking at him curiously, he suddenly remembered that perhaps he ought not to appear too well just yet. At least things don't so often disagree with me. It's the fresh air. Perhaps it is, said the nurse, still looking at him with a mystified expression. But I must talk to Dr. Craven about it. How she stared at you, said Mary when she went away, as if she thought there must be something to find out. I won't have her finding out things, said Cullen. No one must begin to find out yet. When Dr. Craven came that morning, he seemed puzzled also. He asked a number of questions, to Cullen's great annoyance. You stay out in the garden a great deal, he suggested. Where do you go? Cullen put on his favorite air of dignified indifference to opinion. Will not let anyone know where I go, he answered. I go to a place I like. Everyone has orders to keep out of the way. I won't be watched and stared at, you know that. You seem to be out all day, but I do not think it has done you harm. I do not think so. The nurse says that you eat much more than you have ever done before. Perhaps, said Cullen, prompted by a sudden inspiration. Perhaps it is an unnatural appetite. I do not think so. As your food seems to agree with you, said Dr. Craven, you are gaining flesh rapidly, and your color is better. Perhaps. Perhaps I am bloated and feverish. I don't think you're going to win that argument with the doctor, my friend, said Cullen, assuming a discouraging air of gloom. People who are not going to live are often different. Dr. Craven shook his head. He was holding Cullen's wrist, and he pushed up his sleeve and felt his arm. You are not feverish, he said thoughtfully, and such flesh as you have gained is healthy. If we can keep this up, my boy, we need not talk of dying. Your father will be very happy to hear of this remarkable improvement. I won't have him told, Cullen broke forth fiercely. It will only disappoint him if I get worse again, and I may get worse this very night. I might have a raging fever. I feel as if I might be beginning to have one now. I won't have letters written to my father. I won't. You are making me angry, and you know that is bad for me. I feel hot already. I hate being written about and being talked over as much as I hate being stared at. Hush, my boy, Dr. Craven soothed them. Nothing shall be written without your permission. You are too sensitive about things. You must not undo the good which has been done. He said no more about writing to Mr. Craven, and when he saw the nurse, he privately warned her that such a possibility must not be mentioned to the patient. That boy is extraordinarily better, he said. His advance seems almost abnormal, but of course he is doing now of his own free will what we could not make him do before. Still, he excites himself very easily, and nothing must be said to irritate him. Mary and Colin were much alarmed and talked together anxiously from this time, dated their plan of play acting. I may be obliged to have a tantrum, said Colin regretfully. I'd never said that regretfully as a child. I don't want to have one, and I'm not miserable enough now to work myself into a big one. Perhaps I couldn't have one at all. That lump doesn't come in my throat now, and I keep thinking of nice things instead of horrible ones. But if they talk about writing to my father, I shall have to do something. He made up his mind to eat less. But unfortunately, it was not possible to carry out this brilliant idea when he wakened each morning with an amazing appetite, and the table near his sofa was set with a breakfast of homemade bread and fresh butter, snow-white eggs, raspberry jam, and clotted cream. Mary always breakfasted with him, and when they found themselves at the table, particularly if there were delicate slices of sizzling ham sending forth tempting odors from under a hot silver cover, they would look into each other's eyes in desperation. I think we shall have to eat it all this morning, Mary, Colin always ended by saying. We can send away some of the lunch and a great deal of the dinner. But they never found they could send away anything, and the highly polished condition of the empty plates returned to the pantry awakened much comment. I do wish, Colin would say also, I do wish the slices of ham were thicker, and one muffin each is not enough for anyone. It's enough for a person who is going to die, answered Mary when first she heard this, but it's not enough for a person who's going to live. I sometimes feel as if I could eat 3 when those nice fresh heather and gorse smells from the moor come pouring in at the open window. The morning that Dickon, after they had been enjoying themselves in the garden for about 2 hours, went behind a big rose bush and brought forth 2 tin pails and revealed that one was full of rich new milk with cream on top of it, and that the other held cottage-made currant buns folded in a clean blue and white napkin, buns so carefully tucked in that they were still hot. There was a riot of surprise and joyfulness. What a wonderful thing for Mrs. Sowerby to think of. What a kind, clever woman she must be. How good the buns were, and what delicious fresh milk. I mean, does that count as raw milk? You got to be careful of that, right? I mean, I'm sure they were much more careful about it back then than our people have been lately. Pay Martha more. Yeah, poor Martha. And yeah, likely raw milk, yeah. But it's also like not milk that's been shipped, I guess. Like, magic is in her just as it is in Dickon, said Colin. It makes her think of ways to do things, nice things. She is a magic person. Tell her we are grateful, Dickon, extremely grateful. Not financially grateful, but just very grateful. He was given to using rather grown-up phrases at times. He enjoyed them. He liked this so much that he improved upon it. Tell her she has been most bounteous, and our gratitude is extreme. And then, forgetting his grandeur, he fell to and stuffed himself with buns, and drank milk out of the pail in copious draughts, in the manner of any hungry little boy who has been taking unusual exercise and breathing in moorland air, and whose breakfast was more than 2 hours behind him. This, excuse me. This was the beginning of many agreeable incidents of the same kind. They actually woke to the fact that, as Mrs. Soberry had 14 people to provide food for, she might not have enough to satisfy 2 extra appetites every day. So they asked her to let them send some of their shillings to buy things. Finally, there you go, Valena. Yeah, shock. And it's the kids with their allowance who are paying for it. Let that sink in for you. Dickon made the stimulating discovery that in the wood, in the park outside the garden where Mary had first found him, piping to the wild creatures, there was a deep little hollow where you could build a sort of tiny oven with stones and roast potatoes and eggs in it. Roasted eggs were a previously unknown luxury, and very hot potatoes with salt and fresh butter in them were fit for a woodland king, besides being deliciously satisfying. You could buy both potatoes and eggs and eat as many as you liked, without feeling as if you were taking food out of the mouths of 14 people. Yeah, they really don't have anything else to spend it on. Every beautiful morning, the magic was worked by the mystic circle under the plum tree, which provided a canopy of thickening green leaves after its brief blossom time was ended. After the ceremony, Colin always took his walking exercise and throughout the day he exercised his newly found power at intervals. Each day he grew stronger and could walk more steadily and cover more ground. And each day his belief in the magic grew stronger, as well it might. He tried one experiment after another as he felt himself gaining strength, and it was Dickon who showed him the best things of all. "Yesterday," he said one morning after an absence, "I went to Thwaite for mother, and near the blue crow. I mangled that mangling. I went to Thwaite for mother, and near the Blue Cow Inn I seed Bob Haworth. He's the strongest chap of them all. He's a champion wrestler, and he can jump higher than any other chap and throw the hammer farther. He's gone all the way to Scotland for the sports some years. He's knowed me ever since I was a little un, and he's a friendly sort, and I axed him some questions. The gentry calls him a athlete, and I thought of thee, Mr. Colin, and I says, how did they make the muscles stick out that way, Bob? And did thou do anything extra to make thyself so strong? And he says, well, yes, lad, I did. A strong man in a show that came to Thwaite once showed me how to exercise my arms and legs and every muscle in my body. And I says, could a delicate chap make himself stronger with him, Bob? And he laughed and says, thou art the delicate chap. And I says, no, but I knows a young gentleman that's getting well of a long illness, and I wished I knowed some of them tricks to tell him about. I didn't say no names, and he didn't ask none. He's friendly, same as I said, and I stood up and showed me good-natured like. And I imitated what he did, till I knowed it by heart." Colin had been listening excitedly. "Can you show me?" he cried. "Will you?" "Aye, to be sure," Dickon answered, getting up. "But he says the mun do 'em gentle at first, and be careful not to tire thyself. Rest in between times, and take deep breaths, and don't overdo it." "I'll be careful," said Colin. Show me, Dickon. You are the most magic boy in the world." I hope we're not talking about deadlifts. You do gotta be careful for that one. Dickon stood up on the grass and slowly went through a carefully practical but simple series of muscle exercises. Colin watched them with widening eyes. He could do a few while he was sitting down. Presently he did a few gently while he stood upon his already steadied feet. Mary began to do them also. Soot, who was watching the performance, became much disturbed and left his branch and hopped about restlessly because he could not do them too. Probably arms. From that time, the exercises were part of the day's duties as much as the magic was. It became possible for both Colin and Mary to do more of them each time they tried, and such appetites were the results, and such appetites were the results that but for the basket Dickon put down behind the bush each morning when they arrived, they would have been lost. But the little oven in the hollow and Mrs. Soberry's bounties were so satisfying that Mrs. Medlock and the nurse and Dr. Craven became mystified again. You can trifle with your breakfast and seem to disdain your dinner if you are full to the brim with roasted eggs and potatoes and richly frothed new milk and oatcakes and buns and heather, honey, and clotted cream. Yeah, it seems we have an ad coming in, so we will take a little break, 3 or 4 minutes, and we will continue thereafter. Welcome back, everybody. Oh yes, we were talking about all the lovely things that Dickon has been cooking out in the middle of nowhere to feed our 2 starving, growing children. They're eating next to nothing, said the nurse. They'll die of starvation if they can't be persuaded to take some nourishment. And yet see how they look. That would be very mysterious, yeah. Look, exclaimed Mrs. Medlock indignantly. I'm moithered to death with them. They're a pair of young Satans, bursting their jackets one day and the next turning up their noses at the best meals cook can tempt them with. Not a mouthful of that lovely young fowl and bread sauce did they set a fork into yesterday, and the poor woman fair invented a pudding for them, and back it sent. She almost cried. She's afraid she'll be blamed if they starve themselves into their graves. And yet they don't look like they're starving. Poor cook. Dr. Craven came and looked at Colin long and carefully. He wore an extremely worried expression when the nurse talked with him and showed him the almost untouched tray of breakfast she had saved for him to look at. But it was even more worried when he sat down by Colin's sofa and examined him. He had been called to London on business and had not yet seen the boy for nearly 2 weeks. When young things begin to gain health, they gain it rapidly. The waxen tinge had left Colin's skin, and a warm rose showed through it. His beautiful eyes were clear, and the hollows under them and in his cheeks and temples had filled out. His once dark, heavy locks had begun to look as if they sprang healthily from his forehead and were soft and warm with life. His lips were fuller and of a normal color. In fact, as an imitation of a boy who was a confirmed invalid, he was a disgraceful sight. Dr. Craven held his chin in his hand and thought him over. "I am sorry to hear that you do not eat anything," he said. "That will not do. You will lose all you have gained. You have gained amazingly. You ate so well a short time ago." "I told you it was an unnatural appetite," answered Colin. Mary was sitting on her stool nearby, and she suddenly made a very queer sound, which she tried violently to repress, that she ended by almost choking. The poor girl. "What is the matter?" said Dr. Craven, turning to look at her. Mary became quite severe in her manner. "It was something between a sneeze and a cough," she replied with reproachful dignity, "and it got into my throat. But," she said afterward to Colin, "I couldn't stop myself. It just burst out because all at once I couldn't help remembering that last big potato you ate and the way your mouth stretched when you bit through that thick, lovely crust with jam and clotted cream on it." "Is there any way in which those children can get food secretly?" Dr. Craven inquired of Mrs. Medlock. "There's no way unless they dig it out of the earth or pick it off the trees," Mrs. Medlock answered. "They stay out in the grounds all day and see no one but each other. And if they want anything different to eat from what's sent up to them, they need only ask for it." "Well," said Dr. Craven, "so long as going without food agrees with them, we need not disturb ourselves. The boy is a new creature. So is the girl, said Mrs. Medlock. She's begun to be downright pretty since she's filled out and lost her ugly little sour look. Her hair has grown thick and healthy looking, and thick and healthy looking, and she's got a bright color. The gloomist, ill-natured little thing she used to be, and now her and her Master Cullen laugh together like a pair of crazy young ones. Perhaps they're growing fat on that. Perhaps they are, said Dr. Craven. Let them laugh. That person should have his license revoked. Chapter 25. The Curtain. And the secret garden bloomed and bloomed, and every morning revealed new miracles. In the robin's nest there were eggs, and the robin's mate sat upon them, keeping them warm with her feathery little breast and careful wings. At first she was very nervous, and the robin himself was indignantly watchful. Even Dickon did not go near the close-grown corner in those days, but waited until the quiet working of some mysterious spell he seemed to have conveyed to the soul of the little pair that in the garden there was nothing which was not quite like themselves, nothing which did not understand the wonderfulness of what was happening to them, the immense, tender, terrible, heart-breaking beauty and solemnity of eggs. If there had been one person in that garden who had not known through all his or her innermost being that if an egg were taken away or hurt, the whole world would whirl around and crash through space and come to an end. If there had been even one who did not feel it and act accordingly, there could have been no happiness even in that golden springtime air. But they all knew it and felt it, and the robin and his mate knew they knew it. At first the robin watched Mary and Cullen with sharp anxiety. For some mysterious reason he knew he need not watch Dickon. That's the magic, I guess. The first moment he set his bright black eye on Dickon, he knew he was not a stranger, but a sort of robin without a beak or feathers. He could speak robin, which was quite a distinct language, not to be mistaken for any other. To speak robin to a robin is like speaking French to a Frenchman. Dickon always spoke it to the robin himself, so the queer gibberish he used when he spoke to humans did not matter in the least. The robin thought he spoke this gibberish to them because they were not intelligent enough to understand feathered speech. His movements were also robin. They never startled one by being sudden enough to seem dangerous or threatening. Any robin could understand Dickon, so his presence was not even disturbing. But at the outset it seemed necessary to be on guard against the other two. In the first place, the boy creature did not come into the garden on his legs. He was pushed in on a thing with wheels, and the skins of wild animals were thrown over him. That in itself was doubtful. Then, when he began to stand up and move about, he did it in a queer, unaccustomed way, and the others seemed to have to help him. The robin used to secrete himself in a bush and watched this anxiously, his head tilted first on one side and then on the other. He thought that the slow movements might mean that he was preparing to pounce, as cats do. When cats are preparing to pounce, they creep over the ground very slowly. The robin talked this over with his mate in a great deal for a few days, but after that he decided not to speak of the subject because her terror was so great that he was afraid it might be injurious to the eggs. When the boy began to walk by himself, and even to move more quickly, it was an immense relief. But for a long time, or so it seemed, a long time to the robin, he was a source of some anxiety. He did not act as the other humans did. He seemed very fond of walking, but he had a way of sitting or laying down for a while, and then getting up in a disconcerting manner to begin again. One day the robin remembered that when he himself had been made to learn to fly by his parents, he had done much the same sort of thing. He had taken short flights of a few yards, and then had been obliged to rest. So it occurred to him that this boy was learning to fly, or rather to walk. He mentioned this to his mate, and when he told her that the eggs would probably conduct themselves in the same way after they were fledged, she was quite comforted and even became eagerly interested and derived great pleasure from watching the boy over the edge of her nest, though she always thought that the eggs would be much cleverer and learn more quickly. Oh, of course, every parent has to, has to think that about their own children, I guess. But then she said indulgently that humans were always more clumsy and slow than eggs, and most of them never seemed really to learn to fly at all. You never met them in the air or on the treetops. Another raid. Hello, Creative Garden. I hope you had a good stream tonight. Welcome, Raiders. My name is Sidoen. I am the librarian of this little library. We like to read on Mondays. We used to read on Wednesdays, and maybe one day we'll again, but we're playing Monster Hunter Wilds for the time being on Wednesdays. Fridays and Sundays I play Space Marines too, so I do a lot of gaming. But Mondays are reading. Yes, thank you for the shout out. Or was that was the raid shout out, that's right. What were you reading tonight, Creative? That does not show up here. I know some people use a little AI tool that gives them a summary of a channel. I'm very against generative AI though. It's just LLMs. LLMs which fuel a lot of that are considered generative AI, and they're part of the problem. So I won't ever do that. Besides, it lets me ask you questions. We are here reading The Secret Garden. We are a few channels away from finishing, though. A few chapters away from finishing. The stream was good. We're doing more from Washington Irving. Oh, right. Spectre Bridegroom. I'm not familiar with that one. I hope it went well, though. I hope you had a good time tonight. Apparently, we're shouting you out again. What is my automated bot? What is Gwen doing? What is my cat up to? Oh, what prompted that? Let's go look at our actions queue. Yeah, it is kind of weird. Very strange. Oh, well, I'm gonna have to look at that later, I think. I won't get into that now. Yeah, they do have their own. I can't blame someone else for that. I programmed that one myself. Oh, Mopel, you're gonna call me out then. Gonna catch me out. I hope it's the right version. We are on. If it helps, I think we're on. It says here page 331. The next paragraph begins. One day the robin remembered when he. No. That's we just read that one. Yeah, you never met them in the air or on the treetops. Yeah, it's funny. It's odd. You never meet humans flying in the air. A mystery for birds. Yes. Our next paragraph is: after a while, the boy began to move. She is very diligent, yes, and she hunts socks. The other day, like last week, sometime, I was in the basement here doing whatever it was I was doing, gaming or work, whatever it was, and she was at the door, and she just constantly meowed at me and looked back at me, was at the corner saying, basically, hey, come follow me. So I followed her, and she very, section by section, went up the stairs, looking back over her shoulder to make sure that I was following. Led me upstairs, turned down the hallway, and then, as I looked after her, I found her sitting quite proudly in the middle of the hallway amongst all of my socks. She hunts my socks. She thinks they're little critters. She will bite them and shake them dead. And apparently, Vilana had left a bunch of my socks in a basket in the other room, in the bedroom. And she grabbed a bunch. She hunted like 6 of them, dragged them into the hallway, and then brought me over ever so proud to show off her work that she had done on my behalf. I have never been so proud of my cat and so a little befuddled. That was a precious moment. I then picked up the socks, which were gooey and slobbery from her saliva, and put them back in the basket. Or Valetta did, I forget. That is amazing, right? It is beautiful of her. The misunderstanding, but the heart. She hunted for her people. That's awesome. Very creative. I know you've just had a stream. Please go take care of yourself. Exercise your after stream care rights. And of course your community should feel the same depending on how tired you may or may not be. Thank you for dropping by. And yeah, lurk away or depart as you care. We will continue. Lurk and listen, yeah. Yeah, go get food. Food is good. Food is good for tummy. After a while, the boy began to move about as the others did. But all three of the children at times did unusual things. They would stand under the trees and move their arms and legs and heads about in a way which was neither walking nor running nor sitting down. They went through these movements at intervals every day, and the robin was never able to explain to his mate what they were doing or trying to do. He could only say that he was sure that the eggs would never flap about in such a manner. But as the boy who would speak to the robins fluently was doing the thing with them, birds could be quite sure that the actions were not of a dangerous nature. Calisthenics, yeah, they're doing their exercises, yeah. Of course, neither the robin nor his mate had ever heard of the champion wrestler, Bob Haworth, and his exercises for making the muscles stand out like lumps. Robins are not like human beings. Their muscles are always exercised from the first, and so they develop themselves in a natural manner. If you have to fly about to find every meal you eat, your muscles do not become atrophied. Atrophied means wasted away through want of use. When the boy was walking and running about and digging and weeding like the others, the nest in the corner was brooded over by a great peace and content. Fears for the eggs became things of the past. Knowing that your eggs were as safe as they were locked in a bank vault, and the fact that you could watch so many curious things going on made setting a most entertaining occupation. On wet days, the egg's mother sometimes felt even a little dull because the children did not come into the garden. But even on wet days, it could not be said that Mary and Colin were dull. One morning, when the rain streamed down unceasingly, Colin was beginning to feel a little restive, as he was obliged to remain on his sofa, because it was not safe to get up and walk about. Mary had an inspiration. "Now that I am a real boy," Colin had said, "my legs and arms and all my body are so full of magic that I can't keep them still. They want to be doing things all the time. Do you know that when I awaken in the morning, Mary, when it is quite early and the birds are just shouting outside and everything seems just shouting for joy, even the trees and things that we can't really hear, I feel as if I must jump out of bed and shout myself. And if I did it, just think what would happen." Mary giggled inordinately. "The nurse would come running, and Mrs. Medlock would come running, and they would be sure you had gone crazy, and they'd send for the doctor," she said. Colin giggled himself. He could see how they would all look, how horrified by his outbreak, and how amazed to see him standing upright. "I wish my father would come home," he said. "I want to tell him myself. I'm always thinking about it, but we couldn't go on like this much longer. I can't stand laying still and pretending. And besides, I look too different. I wish it wasn't raining today." It was then Mistress Mary had her inspiration. "Colin," she began mysteriously, "do you know how many rooms there are in this house?" "About 1,000, I suppose," he answered. "There's about 100 no one ever goes into," said Mary. "And one rainy day I went and looked into ever so many of them. No one ever knew though Mrs. Medlock nearly found me out. I lost my way when I was coming back, and I stopped at the end of your corridor. That was the second time I heard you crying." Cullen started up on his sofa. 100 rooms no one goes into," he said. "It sounds almost like a secret garden. Suppose we go and look at them. You could wheel me in my chair and nobody would know where we went." "That's what I was thinking," said Mary. "No one would dare to follow us. There are galleries where you could run. We could do our exercises. There is a little Indian room where there is a cabinet full of ivory elephants. There are all sorts of rooms." "Ring the bell," said Colin. When the nurse came in, he gave his orders. "I want my chair," he said. "Miss Mary and I are going to look at the part of the house which is not used. John can push me as far as the picture gallery because there are some stairs. Then he must go away and leave us alone until I send for him again." Rainy days lost their terrors that morning. When the footman had wheeled the chair into the picture gallery and left the two together in obedience to orders, Cullen and Mary looked at each other delightedly. Or delighted, for those following with books. As soon as Mary had made sure that John was really on his way back to his own quarters below stairs, Colin got out of his chair. "I'm going to run from one end of the gallery to the other," he said. "And then I'm going to jump, and then we will do Bob Hallworth's exercises." He's going to jump. That definitely won't be heard or noticed by the staff in the house. And they did all these things and many others. They looked at the portraits and found the plain little girl dressed in green brocade and holding the parrot on her finger. "All these," said Colin, "must be my relations. They'll just think it's Mary? Maybe. He said you hear two sets of kids jumping. That might be a little tough to explain. They lived a long time ago. That parrot one, I believe, is one of my great-great-great-great-aunts. She looks rather like you, Mary. Not as you look now, but as you looked when you came here. Now you are a great deal fatter and better looking." "So are you," said Mary, and they both laughed. They went to the Indian room and amused themselves with the ivory elephants. They found the rose-colored brocade boudoir and the hole in the cushion the mouse had left, but the mice had grown up and run away, and the hole was empty. They saw more rooms and made more discoveries than Mary had made on her first pilgrimage. They found new corridors and corners and flights of steps and new old pictures they liked and weird old things they did not know the use of. It was a curiously entertaining morning, and the feeling of wandering about in the same house with other people, but at the same time feeling as if one were miles away from them, was a fascinating thing. "I'm glad we came," Colin said. "I never knew I lived in such a big, queer old place. I like it. We will ramble about every rainy day. We shall always be finding new queer corners and things." That morning they had found, among other things, such good appetites that when they returned to Colin's room, it was not possible to send the luncheon away untouched. When the nurse carried the tray downstairs, she slapped it down on the kitchen dresser so that Mrs. Loomis, the cook, could see the highly polished dishes and plates. "Look at that," she said. "This is a house of mystery, and those two children are the greatest mysteries in it." "If they keep that up every day," said the strong young footman John, "there'd be small wonder that he weighs twice as much today as he did a month ago. I should have to give up my place in time for fear of doing my muscles an injury." Poor guy. That afternoon, Mary noticed that something new had happened in Colin's room. She had noticed it the day before, but she said nothing because she thought the change might have been made by chance. She said nothing today, but she sat and looked fixedly at the picture over the mantel. Yeah, I kind of thought that was going to be about the picture over the mantel. She could look at it because the curtain had been drawn aside. That was the change she noticed. I know what you want me to tell you, said Cullen, after she had stared a few minutes. I always know when you want me to tell you something. You are wondering why the curtain is drawn back. I'm going to keep it like that. Why? Asked Mary. Because it doesn't make me angry anymore to see her laughing. I awakened when it was bright moonlight 2 nights ago and felt as if the magic was filling the room and making everything so splendid that I couldn't lie still. I got up and looked out of the window. The room was quite light and there was a patch of moonlight on the curtain, and somehow that made me go and pull the cord. She looked right down at me as if she were laughing because she was glad I was standing there. It made me like to look at her. I want to see her laughing like that all the time. I think she must have been a sort of magic person, perhaps. You are so like her now, said Mary, that sometimes I think perhaps you are her ghost made into a boy. That idea seemed to impress Cullen. He thought it over and then answered her slowly. If I were her ghost, my father would be fond of me, he said. Do you want him to be fond of you? Inquired Mary. I used to hate it because he was not fond of me. If he grew fond of me, I think I should tell him about the magic. It might make him more cheerful. Chapter 26. Its Mother. Their belief in the magic was an abiding thing. After the morning's incantations, Cullen sometimes gave them magic lectures. I like to do it, he explained, because when I grow up and make great scientific discoveries, I shall be obliged to lecture about them, and so this is practice. I can only give short lectures now because I am very young, and besides, Ben Weatherstaff would feel as if he was in church and he would go to sleep. So he's at least self-aware enough for that, I guess. The best thing about lecturing, said Ben, is that a chap can get up and say aught he pleases, and no other chap can answer him back. I would be aggin lecturing a bit myself sometimes. Yeah. I've been to a church a few times in my life, and goodness, I wish I could have slept with those pews. That's why those pews are made out of wood. You can't sleep in those. But when Cullen held forth under his tree, old Ben fixed devouring eyes on him and kept him there. He looked him over with critical affection. It was not so much the lecture which interested him as the legs which looked straighter and stronger each day, the boyish head which held itself up so well, the once sharp chin and hollow cheeks which had filled and rounded out and the eyes which had begun to hold the light he remembered in another pair. Sometimes when Cullen felt Ben's earnest gaze meant that he was much impressed, he wondered what he was reflecting on, and once, when he had seemed quite entranced, he questioned him. What are you thinking about, Ben Weatherstaff? He asked. I was thinking, answered Ben. As I'd warrant has gone up 3 or 4 pound this week. I was looking at the calves and at the shoulders. I'd like to get thee on a pair of scales. It's the magic and Mrs. Soberry's buns and milk and things, said Cullen. You see, the scientific experiment has succeeded. That morning, Dickon was too late to hear the lecture. When he came, he was ruddy and running, and his funny face looked more twinkling than usual. As they had a good deal of weeding to do after the rains, they fell to work. They always had plenty to do after a warm, deep sinking rain. The moisture, which was good for the flowers, was also good for the weeds, which thrust up tiny blades of grass and points of leaves, which must be pulled up, for their roots took too firm hold. Cullen was as good at weeding as anyone in these days, and he could lecture while he was doing it. The magic works best when you work yourself, he said this morning. You can feel it in your bones and muscles. I am going to read books about bones and muscles, but I am going to write a book about magic. I'm making it up now. I keep finding out things." It was not very long after he said this that he had laid down his trowel and stood up on his feet. He had been silent for several minutes, and had seen that he was thinking out lectures, as he often did. When he dropped his trowel and stood upright, it seemed to Mary and Dickon as if a sudden strong thought had made him do it. He stretched himself out to his tallest height, and he threw out his arms exultantly. Color glowed in his face, and his strange eyes widened with joyfulness. All at once he had realized something to the full. "Mary, Dickon," he cried, "just look at me." They stopped their weeding and looked at him. "Do you remember that first morning you brought me in here?" he demanded. Dickon was looking at him very hard. Being an animal charmer, he could see more things than most people could, and many of them were things he never talked about. He saw some of them now in this boy. "Aye, that we do," he answered. Mary looked hard too, but she said nothing. "Just this minute," said Colin. "All at once I remembered it myself, when I looked at my hand digging with the trowel, and I had to stand up on my feet to see if it was real. And it is real. I'm well. I'm well." "Aye, that th'art," said Dickon. I'm well, said Colin again. His face went quite red all over. He had known it before in a way. He had hoped it, and had felt it, and thought about it. But just at that minute something had rushed all through him, a sort of rapturous belief and realization, and it had been so strong that he could not help calling out. "I shall live forever, and ever, he cried grandly. "I shall find out thousands and thousands of things. I shall find out about people and creatures and everything that grows, like Dickon, and I shall never stop making magic. I'm well. I feel. I feel as if I want to shout out something. Something thankful, joyful. And perhaps quiet because you're hiding in the secret garden that no one knows about. I think that's the detail that perhaps got overlooked in your joyful outburst." Ben Weatherstaff, who had been working near a rose bush, glanced round at him. "The might sing, oh dear, the might sing the doxology," he suggested in his driest grunt. He had no opinion of the doxology, and he did not make the suggestion with any particular reverence. But Colin was of an exploring mind, and he knew nothing about the doxology. Like me, I don't have a clue either. "What is that?" he inquired. "Dickon can sing it for thee, I'll warrant," replied Ben Weatherstaff. Dickon answered with his all-perceiving animal charmer's smile. "They sing it in church," he said. "Mother says she believes the skylark sings it when they gets up in the morning." Early morning. "If she says that, it must be a nice song," Colin answered. "I've never been in a church myself. I was always too ill. Sing it, Dickon. I want to hear it." Dickon was quite simple and unaffected about it. He understood what Colin felt better than Colin did himself. He understood by a sort of instinct so natural that he did not know it was understanding. He pulled off his cap and looked round, still smiling. "Thou must take off the cap," he said to Colin, "and so mun that ben, and thou mun stand up in thy nose." Stand up the nose, yes. Don't stand up your nose in your... Yeah, never mind. Take off your hats and stand up respectfully. Colin took off his cap, and the sun shone and warmed his thick hair as he watched Dickon intently. Ben Weatherstaff scrambled up from his knees and bared his head too, with a sort of puzzled, half-resentful look on his old face, as if he didn't know exactly why he was doing this remarkable thing. Dickon stood out among the trees and rose bushes and began to sing, in quite a simple matter-of-fact way, and in a nice strong boy voice. I don't have a boy voice, and I don't have a song voice, but I'll read what they sang. "Praise God, from whom all blessings flow. Praise him, all creatures here below. Praise him above, ye heavenly host. Praise Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. Amen. When he had finished, Ben Weatherstaff was standing quite still, with his jaws set obstinately, but with a disturbed look in his eyes fixed on Cullen. Cullen's face was thoughtful and appreciative. "It's a very nice song," he said. "I like it. Perhaps it means just what I mean when I want to shout out that I am thankful to the magic." He stopped and thought in a puzzled way. Perhaps they are both the same thing. How can we know the exact names of everything? Sing it again, Dickon. Let us try, Mary. I want to sing it too. It's my song. How does it begin? Praise God from whom all blessings flow. And then there's a picture, and I think this is the most clear picture I've seen of these boys for this entire book. The old man, Ben's not quite that tall, is he? And they sang it again, and Mary and Colin lifted their voices as musically as they could, and Dickens swelled quite loud and beautiful. Okay, so this is no longer a secret garden. And at the second line, Ben Weatherstaff raspingly cleared his throat, and at the third he joined in with such vigor that it seemed almost savage. And when the amen came to an end, Mary observed that the very same thing had happened to him, which had happened when he found out that Colin was not a cripple. His chin was twitching, and he was staring and winking his leathery old cheeks wet. You don't have pictures in the version you own? They're definitely not good at being quiet. No, they quite suck at being quiet. You don't have pictures. Maybe I can I... let's see, open image in new tab. That will give me a URL. Here, I'll put a link in here. This is the picture that I can see. This is the lazy way for me to do it, to make you click on a link rather than display an image in the stream. But I think that is the most colorful, well-defined image I've seen so far available in this book. I am using, if you care to know, the book from the Gutenberg.org website. Literally, the title's in there too. You can look it up there if you like. Right. Ben's cheeks were wet. "I never seed no sense in the doxology afore," he said hoarsely, "but I may change my mind in time. I should say that'd gone up 5 pounds this week, Mr. Cullen. 5 on 'em." Cullen was looking across the garden as something attracting his attention, and his expression had become a startled one. Yeah, it's not a bad picture, is it? It's not like the super cool, awesome, accurate art we get these days, but it's like for book art, it's pretty good. "Who's coming in here?" he said quickly. "Who is it?" The door in the ivied wall had been pushed gently open, and a woman had entered. She had come in with the last line of their song, and she had stood still listening and looking at them, with the ivy behind her, the sunlight drifting through the trees and dappling her long blue cloak, and her nice fresh face smiling across the greenery. She was rather like a softly colored illustration in one of Colin's books. She had wonderful, affectionate eyes, which seemed to take everything in, all of them, even Ben Weatherstaff and the creatures, and every flower that was in bloom. Unexpectedly, as she had appeared, not one of them felt that she was an intruder at all. Dickens's eyes lighted like lamps. "It's Mother! That's who it is!" he cried, and he went across the grass at a run. Colin began to move toward her too, and Mary went with him. They both felt their pulses beat faster. "It's Mother!" cried Dickon. Dickon said again when they met halfway. "I knowed thou wanted to see her, and I told her where the door was hid." Cullen held out his hand with a sort of flushed royal shyness, but his eyes quite devoured her face. Even when I was ill, I wanted to see you, he said. You and Dickon in the secret garden. I never wanted to see anyone or anything before. The sight of his uplifted face brought about a sudden change in her own. She flushed and the corners of her mouth shook and a mist seemed to sweep over her eyes. Hey, dear lad, she broke out tremulously. Hey, dear lad. As if she had not known she were going to say it, she did not say Mr. Cullen, but just dear lad. Quite suddenly. She might have said it to Dickon in the same way if she had seen something in his face which touched her. Cullen liked it. Are you surprised because I am so well? He asked. She put her hand on his shoulder and smiled the mist out of her eyes. Aye, that I am, she said. But thou art so like thy mother that made my heart jump. Do you think, said Cullen a little awkwardly, that will make my father like me? Aye, for sure, dear lad. She answered, and she gave his shoulder a soft, quick pat. He mun come home. He mun come home. Susan Sowerby, said Ben Weatherstaff, getting close to her. Look at the lad's legs, wilt thou? They was like drumsticks in stocking 2 months ago, and I heard folk telling as they were bandy and knock-kneed, both at the same time. Look at 'em now. Susan Sowerby laughed a comfortable laugh. They're going to be fine, strong lad's legs in a bit, she said. Let him go on playing and working in the garden, and eating hearty, and drinking plenty of good sweet milk, and there'll not be a finer pair of Yorkshire, thank God for it. She put both hands on Mistress Mary's shoulders and looked her little face over in a motherly fashion. And thee too, she said, the heart grown near as hearty as our Elizabeth Ellen. I'll warrant thou art like thy mother too. Our Martha told me Mrs. Medlock heard she was a pretty woman. Thou'lt be like a blush rose when thou grows up, my little lass. Bless thee. Apologize, there's no interpretation for Yorkshire here on this channel. She did not mention that when Martha came home on her day out, as described the plain sallow child, she had said that she had no confidence whatever in what Mrs. Medlock had heard. It doesn't stand to reason that a pretty woman could be the mother of such a foul little lass, she had added obstinately. Mary had not the time to pay much attention to her changing face. She had only known that she looked different, and seemed to have a great deal more hair, and that it was growing very fast. But remembering her pleasure in looking at the Mem Sahib in the past, she was glad to hear that she might someday look like her. Susan Sowerby went around the garden, and with them almost told the whole story of it, and shown every bush and tree which had come alive. Cullen walked on one side of her, and Mary on the other. Each of them kept looking up at her comfortable rosy face, secretly curious about the delightful feeling she gave them. A sort of warm, supported feeling. This seemed as if she understood them as Dickon understood his creatures. She stooped over the flowers and talked about them as if they were children. Soot followed her, and once or twice cawed at her and flew upon her shoulder, as if it were Dickon's. When they told her about the robin and the first flight of the young one, she laughed a motherly little mellow laugh in her throat. And you have to forgive me, but I have a friend who's binging me on Steam Chat right now. I need to tell him I am in the middle of streaming. No ATs yet. Alright, sorry, where was I? I suppose learning him to fly is like learning children to walk, but I am feared I should be all in a worrit if mine had wings instead of legs, she said. That would be very different. It was because she seemed such a wonderful woman in her nice moorland cottage way that at last she was told about the magic. Do you believe in magic? Asked Colin after he had explained about Indian fakirs. I do hope you do. That I do, lad, she answered. I never knowed it by that name, but what does that name matter? I didn't know there was a stage adaptation. I guess I shouldn't be surprised. Sorry, where was I? Never knowed it by that name, but what does the name matter? I warrant they call it a different name in France and a different one in Germany. The same thing as set the seeds swollen and the sun shining, made thee a well lad, and it's the good thing. It isn't like us poor fools who think it matters if us is called out our own names. The big good thing doesn't stop to worrit. Bless thee, it goes on making worlds by the million, worlds like us. Never thee stop believing in the big good thing and knowing the world's full of it, and call it what thou likes. Thou wert singing to it when I come into the garden. I felt so joyful, said Colin, opening his beautiful, strange eyes at her. Suddenly I felt how different I was, how strong my arms and legs were, you know, and how I could dig and stand, and I jumped up and wanted to shout out something to anything that would listen. The magic listened when they sung the doxology. It would ha' listened to anything they'd sung. It was the joy that mattered, eh, lad? Lad, what names to the joy maker? And she gave his shoulders a quick soft pat again. She had packed a basket which held a regular feast this morning, and when the hungry hour came and Dickon brought it out from its hiding place, she sat down with them under their tree and watched them devour their food, laughing and quite gloating over their appetites. She was full of fun and made them laugh at all sorts of odd things. She told them stories in broad Yorkshire and taught them new words. She laughed as if she could not help it when they told her of the increasing difficulty there was in pretending that Colin was still a fretful invalid. You see, we can't help laughing nearly all the time when we are together, explained Colin, and it doesn't sound ill at all. We try to choke it back, but it will burst out, and the sound's worse than ever. There's one thing that comes into my mind so often, said Mary, and I can scarcely ever hold in when I think of it suddenly. I keep thinking, suppose Colin's face should get to look like a full moon. It isn't like one yet, but he gets a tiny bit fatter every day, and suppose some morning it should look like one. What should we do? Bless us all. I can see that has a good bit of the play acting to do, said Susan Sowerby. But that won't have to keep it up much longer. Mr. Craven will come home. Do you think he will? asked Colin. Why? Susan Sowerby chuckled softly. I suppose it'd nigh break thy heart if he found out before thou told him in thy own way, she said. Thou's laid awake nights planning it. I couldn't bear anyone else to tell him, said Colin. I think about different ways every day. I think now I just want to run into his room. That'd be a fine start for him, said Susan Sowerby. I'd like to see his face, lad. I would that. He mun come back, that he mun. One of the things they talked of was the visit they were to make to her cottage. They planned it all. They were to drive over the moor and lunch outdoors among the heather. They would see all 12 children and Dickon's garden and would not come back until they were tired. Susan Sowerby got up at last to return to the house and Mrs. Medlock. It was time for Colin to be wheeled back also. But before he got into his chair, he stood quite close to Susan and fixed his eyes on her with a kind of bewildered adoration. And he suddenly caught hold of the fold of her blue cloak and held it fast. You are what I wanted, he said. I wish you were my mother, as well as Dickon's. All at once, Susan Sowerby bent down and drew him with her and drew him with her warm arms, close against the bosom under her blue cloak, as if he had been Dickens's brother. The quick mist swept over her eyes. "Eh, dear lad," she said, "thy own mother's in this here very garden, I do believe. She couldn't keep out of it. Thy father mun come back to thee. He mun." Chapter 27, In the Garden. In each century since the beginning of the world, wonderful things have been discovered. In the last century, more amazing things were found out than in any century before. In this new century, hundreds of things still more astounded will be brought to light. At first, people refuse to believe that a strange new thing can be done. Then they begin to hope it can be done. Then they see it can be done. Then it is done, and all the world wonders why it was not done centuries ago. That mentality and process is very true. One of the new things people began to find out in the last century was that thoughts, just mere thoughts, are as powerful as electric batteries, as good for one as sunlight is, or as bad for one as poison. To let a sad thought or a bad one get into your mind is as dangerous as letting a scarlet fever germ get into your body. If you let it stay there after it has got in, you may never get over it as long as you live. So long as Mistress Mary's mind was full of disagreeable thoughts about her dislikes and sour opinions of people and her determination not to be pleased by or interested in anything, she was a yellow-faced, sickly, bored and wretched child. Circumstances, however, were very kind to her, though she was not at all aware of it. They began to push her about for her own good. When her mind gradually filled itself with robins and moorland cottages crowded with children, and with queer, crabbed old gardeners and common little Yorkshire housemaids, with springtime and with secret gardens coming alive day by day, and also with the moor boy and his creatures, there was no room left for the disagreeable thoughts which affected her liver and her digestion and made her yellow and tired. I'm gonna guess a lot of it is exercise, to be honest. So long as Cullen shut himself up in his room and thought only of his fears and weakness and his detestation of people, or detestation of people who looked at him and reflected hourly on humps and early death, he was a hysterical, half-crazed little hypochondriac who knew nothing of the sunshine and the spring, and also did not know that he could get well and could stand upon his feet if he tried to do it. When new, beautiful thoughts began to push out the old hideous ones, life began to come back to him. His blood ran healthily through his veins and strength poured into him like a flood. His scientific experiment was quite practical and simple, and there was nothing weird about it at all. Much more surprising things can happen to anyone who, when a disagreeable or discouraged thought comes into his mind, just has the sense to remember in time and push it out by putting in an agreeable, determinedly courageous one. Two things cannot be in place at once. Have I read The Basket of Flowers by Christopher von Schmidt? As it's another incredible... I have not. I am actually poorly read. Part of the reason why I'm doing reading streams at all is... I did my high school education in Australia. We are back in Canada now, where I met Valana, my wife. And I have not read the books that she has read. There are different books in there. Not that I cared particularly much for reading back then, so I'm actually not very well read at all. The books I read today are largely from a list of recommendations that she has made. So Yeah, I have the closest thing to basket of flowers that I can remember is the anime, the fruit basket one, which is completely unrelated. I'm certain. Don't even remember the name of that show. Where was I? Two things cannot be in place at once. Where you tend a rose, my lad, a thistle cannot grow. While the secret garden was coming alive, and two children were coming alive with it, there was a man wandering about certain faraway beautiful places in the Norwegian fjords and the valleys and mountains of Switzerland. And he was a man who, for 10 years, had kept his mind filled with dark and heartbroken thinking. He had not been courageous. He had never tried to put any other thoughts in the place of the dark ones. He had wandered by blue lakes and thought of them. He had lain on mountain sides with sheets of deep blue gentians blooming all about him, and flower breaths filling all the air he had thought that all the air he had thought them. It helped recommend some good classic literature. I leave that selection up to Valana. You can probably send her a couple messages suggesting a few books. That's not a bad idea. Thank you very much. Dear, this is a big paragraph. Where were we? He had lain on mountainsides with sheets of deep blue gentians blooming all about him, and flower breaths filling all the air, and he had thought them. A terrible sorrow had fallen upon him when he had been happy, and he had let his soul fill itself with blackness, and he had refused obstinately to allow any rift of light to pierce through. He had forgotten and deserted his home and his duties. When he traveled about, darkness so brooded over him that the sight of him was a wrong done to other people, because it was as if he poisoned the air about him with gloom. Most strangers thought he must be either half mad or a man with some hidden crime on his soul. He was a tall man with a drawn face and crooked shoulders, and the name he always entered on a hotel register was Archibald Craven, Misselthwaite Manor, Yorkshire, England. Looks like we are having ads coming very soon. Once again, we will pause here. We'll continue after we return. Thank you. Let's have food. Get to the book. This sorrowful and morbid man, whom we know as Archibald Craven, master of Misselthwaite Manor, goes about England, touring lovely, beautiful, natural sceneries and being miserable. He had traveled far and wide since the day he saw Mistress Mary in his study and told her she might have her bit of earth. He had been in the most beautiful places in Europe, though he had remained nowhere more than a few days. He had chosen the quietest and remotest spots. He had been on the tops of mountains whose heads were in the clouds, and had looked down on other mountains when the sun rose and touched them with such light as made it seem as if the world were just being born. The light had never seemed to touch himself until one day he realized that for the first time in 10 years, a strange thing had happened. He was in a wonderful valley in the Austrian Tyrol, and he had been walking alone through such beauty as might have lifted any man's soul out of shadow. He had walked a long way, and it had not lifted his. But at last he had felt tired, and had thrown himself down to rest on a carpet of moss by a stream. It was a clear little stream, which ran quite merrily along its narrow way through the luscious damp greenness. Sometimes it made a sound rather like a low laughter as it bubbled over and round stones. He saw birds come and dip their heads to drink in it, and then flick their wings and fly away. It seemed like a thing alive, and yet its tiny voice made the stillness seem deeper. The valley was very, very still. As he sat gazing into the clear running of the water, Archibald Craven gradually felt his mind and body both grow quiet as the valley itself. He wondered if he were going to sleep, but he was not. He sat and gazed at the sunlit water, and his eyes began to see things growing at its edge. There was one lovely mass of blue forget-me-nots growing so close to the stream that its leaves were wet, and at these he found himself looking as he remembered he had looked at such things years ago. He was actually thinking tenderly how lovely it was and what wonders of blue its hundreds of little blossoms were. Forget-me-nots? Oh, yeah, okay, yeah. The problem is there's a me, a dash, and then the knots is on the next line. But when you put it on a single line, forget-me-nots makes it rolls off the tongue a lot easier. He did not know that just that simple thought was slowly filling his mind, filling it until other things were softly pushed aside. It was as if a sweet, clear spring had begun to rise in a stagnant pool that had risen and risen until at last it swept the dark water away. But of course, he did not think of this himself. He only knew that the valley seemed to grow quieter and quieter as he sat and stared at the bright, delicate blueness. He did not know how long he sat there or what was happening to him, but at last he moved as if he were awakening, and he got up slowly and stood on the moss carpet, drawing a long, deep, soft breath and wondering at himself. Something seemed to have been unbound and released in him very quietly. "What is it?" he said, almost in a whisper, and he passed his hand over his forehead. "I almost feel as if I were alive." I do not know enough about the wonderfulness of undiscovered things to be able to explain how this had happened to him. Neither does anyone else yet. He did not understand at all himself, but he remembered this strange hour months afterward when he was at Misselthwaite again, and he found out quite by accident that on this very day Cullen had cried out as he went into the secret garden, I am going to live forever and ever and ever." Yeah, depression hits us differently. The singular calmness remained with him the rest of the evening, and he slept a new reposeful sleep. Reposeful? Okay, reposeful sleep, but it was not with him very long. He did not know that it could be kept. By the next night, he had opened the doors wide to his dark thoughts, and they had come trooping and rushing back. He left the valley and went on his wandering way again. But strange as it seemed to him, there were minutes, sometimes half hours, when, without his knowing why, the black burden seemed to lift itself again, and he knew he was a living man and not a dead one. Slowly, for no reason that he knew of, he was coming alive with the garden. As the golden summer changed into the deeper golden autumn, he went to the lake of Como. There he found the loveliness of a dream. He spent his days upon the crystal blueness of the lake, where he walked back into the soft, thick verdure of the hills and tramped until he was tired so that he might sleep. But by this time he had begun to sleep better, he knew, and his dreams had ceased to be a terror to him. Perhaps, he thought, my body is growing stronger. This guy hikes nonstop for a living. I don't know if your body can get much stronger. It was growing stronger, but because of the rare, peaceful hours when his thoughts were changed, His soul was slowly growing stronger too. He began to think of Misselwaith and wonder if he should not go home. This whole book has some great lessons to learn from. Oh, thank you. I'm glad you appreciate my reading. I definitely at this moment, like, I'm remembering depression. Like, I've gone through depression and kind of recognize some, like, the book here is implying magic, right? Which is a lovely sentiment. The garden's coming back to life. The man is coming back to life. It's very romantic. But also, like, the brain suddenly deciding that, you know, we're going to heal ourselves. Perhaps he stumbled across a mental trick without knowing it. But hey, healing's a beautiful thing, no matter where it comes from. Now and then he wondered vaguely about his boy and asked himself what he should feel when he went and stood by the carved, four-posted bed again and looked down at the sharply chiseled ivory white face while it slept, the black lashes rimmed so startlingly the closed-shut eyes. He shrank from it. One marvel of a day, he had walked so far that when he returned the moon was high and full, and all the world was purple shadow and silver. The stillness of lake and shore and wood was so wonderful that he did not go into the villa he lived in. He walked down to a little bowered terrace at the water's edge and sat upon a seat and breathed in all the heavenly scents of the night. He felt the strange calmness stealing over him, and it grew deeper and deeper until he fell asleep. You know, I wish I could afford to just have a house somewhere in, you know, beautiful, undeniably fantastic scenery and just go there whenever I wanted to. You can relate to books as you read them. Yeah, honestly, I think that's kind of an author's goal, right? I want to write a book. Well, I want people to read my book. And the best books are ones that you can relate to. You have the ability to form some sort of empathy with. So if this book does it for you, that's a fantastic praise for the book, for certainly. If we win the lotto, I can't empathize to this part. The guy is too rich. They're all rich in these books, I think. But they're more human than the rich people we know of today, I suspect. He did not know when he fell asleep, and when he began to dream, his dream was so real that he did not feel as if he were dreaming. He remembered afterward how intensely wide awake and alert he had thought he was. He thought that as he sat and breathed in the scent of the late roses and listened to the lapping of the water at his feet, he heard a voice calling. It was sweet and clear and happy and far away. It seemed very far, but he heard it as distinctly as if it had been at his very side. Archie, 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 it said, and then again sweeter and clearer than before. Archie, Archie. He thought he sprang to his feet, not even startled. It was such a real voice, and it seemed so natural that he should hear it. Lilias, Lilias, he answered. Lilias, where are you? In the garden. It came back like a sound from a golden flute. In the garden. And then the dream ended. But he did not awaken. He slept soundly and sweetly all through the lovely night. When he did awake, at last it was brilliant morning, and a servant was standing staring at him. He was an Italian servant, and was accustomed, as all the servants of the villa were, to accepting, without question, any strange thing his foreign master might do. No one ever knew when he would go out or come in, or where he would choose to sleep, or if he would roam about the garden, or lie in the boat on the lake all night. The man held a slaver with some letters on it, and he waited quietly until Mr. Craven took them. When he had gone away, Mr. Craven sat a few moments holding them in his hand and looking at the lake. His strange calm was still upon him, and something more. a lightness, as if the cruel thing which had been done had not happened as he thought, as if something had changed. He was remembering the dream, the real dream. In the garden, he said, wondering at himself. In the garden, but the door is locked and the key is buried deep. I mean, it was buried literally just under the surface, wasn't it? I think the ground may have shifted. When he glanced at the letters a few minutes later, he saw that the one laying at the top of the rest was an English letter and came from Yorkshire. It was directed in a plain woman's hand, but it was not a hand he knew. He opened it, scarcely thinking of the writer, but the first words attracted his attention at once. Dear Sir, I am Susan Sowerby. That may be bold to speak to you once on the moor. It was about Miss Mary I spoke. I will make bold to speak again. Please, sir, I would come home if I was you. I think you would be glad to come, and if you'll excuse me, sir, I think your lady would ask you to come if she was here. Your obedient servant, Susan Sowerby. Mr. Craven read the letter twice before he put it back in its envelope. He kept thinking about the dream. I will go back to Misselthwaite, he said. Yes, I'll go at once. And he went through the garden to the villa and ordered Pitcher to prepare for his return to England. Pitcher was his butler or doorman or whatever. He hasn't been around the villa. In a few days, he was in Yorkshire again, and on his long railroad journey he found himself thinking of his boy as he had never thought in all the 10 years past. During those years he had only wished to forget him. Now, though he did not intend to think about him, memories of him constantly drifted into his mind. He remembered the black days when he had raved like a madman because the child was alive and the mother was dead. He had refused to see it, and when he had gone to look at it at last, it had been such a weak, wretched thing that everyone had been sure it would die in a few days. But to the surprise of those who took care of it, the days passed and it lived, and then everyone believed it would be a deformed and crippled creature. The next book, I don't think we have selected one. There's a list, and I'm going to have to decide pretty soon because this is ending tonight, right? The next book I read, I'll probably announce on my Blue Sky account. Yes, because I'll have to make a thumbnail for it at the very least. He had not meant to be a bad father, but he had not felt like a father at all. You weren't, and you were a bad father. He had supplied doctors and nurses and luxuries, but he had shrunk from the mere thought of the boy and had buried himself in his own misery. The first time, after a year's absence, he returned to Misselthwaite, and the small, miserable-looking thing languidly and indifferently lifted its face to the great grey eyes with black lashes round them, so like and yet so horribly unlike the happy eyes he had adorned. He could not bear the sight of them, and turned away pale as death. After that, he scarcely ever saw him except when he was asleep, and all he knew of him was that he was a confirmed invalid, with a vicious, hysterical, half-insane temper. He could only be kept from his furies, dangerous to himself, by being given his own way in every detail. That's also part of why you're a bad father. All this was not an uplifting thing to recall, but as the train whirled him through mountain passes and golden plains, the man who was coming alive began to think in a new way, and he thought long and steadily and deeply. Perhaps I have been all wrong for 10 years, he said to himself. 10 years is a long time. It may be too late to do anything, quite too late. What have I been thinking of? Of course, This was the wrong magic to begin saying, too late. Even Colin could have told him that. But he knew nothing of magic, either black or white. This he had yet to learn. He wondered if Susan Sowerby had taken courage written to him only because of the motherly creature. He had realized that the boy was much worse, was fatally ill. If he had not been under the spell of the curious calmness which had taken possession of him, he would have been more wretched than ever. But the calm had brought a sort of courage and hope with it. Instead of giving way to thoughts of the worst, he actually found he was trying to believe in better things. That's really good. That's really strong. Yeah, Great Gatsby or White Fang. Yeah, those are two of the options, yeah. Could it be possible that she sees that I may be able to do him good and control him, he thought. I will go and see her on my way to Misselwaith. But when, on his way across the moor, he stopped the carriage at the cottage, 7 or 8 children who were playing about gathered in a group, and bobbing 7 or 8 friendly and polite curtsies told him that their mother had gone to the other side of the moor early in the morning to help a woman who had a new baby. Our Dickon, they volunteered, was over at the manor working in one of the gardens where he went several days each week. Well, I mean, like, okay, so committal. Great Gatsby or White Fang is 2 of the big list you gave me, so that is actually relatively quite committal. Don't even remember the difference between the 2 books, to be perfectly honest. Yeah. Where were we? Yeah, Dickon. Yeah, so Dickon is over at the manor working on one of the gardens quite frequently. Mr. Craven looked over the collection of sturdy little bodies and round, red-cheeked faces, each one grinning in its own peculiar way, and he awoke to the fact that they were a healthy, likable lot, despite the fact that you don't pay them very much to eat food with. He smiled at their friendly grins and took a golden sovereign from his pocket and gave it to our Elizabeth Ellen, who was the oldest. Maybe give that to Martha, like, frequently. Book is on your list to read in 2020. Do you have like a list then? Like the books you read in the past in a particular order, you're going to like repeat that order of reading or something? That's kind of how I interpret your comment. If you divide that into 8 parts, there will be a half-crown for each of you, he said. Then, amid grins and chuckles and bobbing and curtsies, he drove away, leaving ecstasy and nudging elbows and little jumps of joy behind. The drive across the wonderfulness of the moor was a soothing thing. Why did it seem to give him a sense of homecoming, which he had been sure he could never feel again? The sense of the beauty of land and sky, and purple bloom of distance, and a warming of the heart at drawing near to the great old house which had held those of his blood for 600 years. Oh, he had driven away from it the last time, shuddering to think of its closed rooms, and the boy lying in the 4-posted bed with the brocaded hangings. Was it possible that perhaps he might find him changed a little for the better, and that he might overcome his shrinking from him? How real that dream had been, how wonderful and clear the voice which called back to him in the garden. In the garden. I will try to find the key, he said. I will try to open the door. I must, though I don't know why. When he arrived at the manor, the servants who received him with the usual ceremony noticed that he looked better, and that he did not go to the remote rooms where he usually lived, attended by Pitcher. He went into the library and sent for Mrs. Medlock. She came to him somewhat excited and curious and flustered. How is Master Colin, Medlock? He inquired. Well, sir, Mrs. Medlock answered, he's different, in a manner of speaking. Worse? He suggested. Mrs. Medlock really was flushed. Well, you see, sir, she tried to explain, neither Dr. Craven, nor the nurse, nor me can exactly make him out. Why is that? To tell the truth, sir, Master Cullen might be better, and he might be changing for the worse. His appetite, sir, is past understanding, and his ways, has he become more peculiar? Her master asked, knitting his brows anxiously. You don't repeat books, but every couple of years you revisit a book that you keep a list of. What I read every year as I get new books. Oh, okay. So you have like a top selection of books, and you add to that. Cool. That's it, sir. He's growing very peculiar. When you compare him with what he used to be, he used to eat nothing, and then suddenly he began to eat something enormous, and then he stopped again all at once, and the meals were sent back just as they used to be. You never knew, sir, perhaps, that out of doors he never would let himself be taken. The things we've gone through to get him to go out in his chair would leave a body trembling like a leaf. He'd throw himself into such a state that Dr. Craven said he couldn't be responsible for forcing him. Well, sir, just without warning, not long after one of his worst tantrums, he suddenly insisted on being taken out every day by Miss Mary and Susan Sowerby's boy, Dickon, that could push his chair. He took a fancy to both Miss Mary and Dickon brought his tame animals, and, if you'll credit it, sir, out of doors he will stay from morning until night. How does he look? Was the next question. If he took his food natural, sir, you'd think he was putting on flesh, but we're afraid it may be a sort of bloat. He laughs sometimes in a queer way when he's alone with Miss Mary. He never used to laugh at all. Dr. Craven is coming to see you at once, if you'll allow him. He never was as puzzled in his life. Where is Master Cullen now? Mr. Craven asked. In the garden, sir. He's always in the garden, though not a human creature is allowed to go near for fear they'll look at him. Mr. Craven scarcely heard her last words. In the garden, he said. And after he had sent Mrs. Medlock away, he stood and repeated it again and again. In the garden. He had to make an effort to bring himself back to the place he was standing in, and when he felt he was on earth again, he turned and went out of the room. He took his way, as Mary had done, through the door in the shrubbery and among the laurels and fountain beds. The fountain was playing now and was encircled by beds of brilliant autumn flowers. He crossed the lawn and turned into the long walk by the ivied walls. He did not walk quickly, but slowly, and his eyes were on the path. He felt as if he were being drawn back to the place he had so long forsaken, and he did not know why. As he drew near to it, his step became still more slow. He knew where the door was, even though the ivy hung thick over it, but he did not know exactly where it lay, that buried key. So he stopped and stood still, looking about him, and almost the moment after he had paused, he started and listened, asking himself if he were walking in a dream. The ivy hung thick over the door. The ivy was buried under the shrubs. No human being had passed that portal for 10 lonely years, and yet inside the garden there were sounds. There were the sounds of running, scuffling feet, seeming to chase round and round under the trees. There were strange sounds of lowered, suppressed voices, exclamations, and smothered, joyous cries. It seemed actually like the laughter of young things, the uncontrollable laughter of children who were trying not to be heard, but who, in a moment or so, as their excitement mounted, would burst forth. What in heaven's name was he dreaming of? What in heaven's name did he hear? Was he losing his reason and thinking he heard things which were not for human ears? Was it that the far clear voice had meant? There should probably be a comma there. Was it that? The far clear. Yeah, I abandoned the sentence. And then the moment came. The uncontrollable moment when the sounds forgot to hush themselves. The feet ran faster and faster. They were nearing the garden door. There was a quick, strong young breathing and a wild outbreak of laughing shouts which could not be contained. And the door in the wall was flung wide open, the sheet of ivy swinging back, and a boy burst through it at full speed and, without seeing the outsider, dashed almost into his arms. Mr. Craven had extended them just in time to save him from falling as a result of his unseeing dash against him. And when he held him back to look at him, in amazement at his being there, he truly gasped for breath. He was a tall boy, and a handsome one. He was glowing with life, and his running had sent splendid color leaping to his face. He threw the thick hair back from his forehead and lifted a pair of strange gray eyes full of boyish laughter and rimmed with black lashes like a fringe. It was the eyes which made Craven gasp for breath. Who? What? Who? He stammered. This was not what Colin had expected. This was not what he had planned. He had never thought of such a meeting, and yet to come dashing out, winning a race, perhaps it was even better. He drew himself up to his very tallest. Mary, who had been running with him, had dashed through the door too, believed that he had managed to make himself look taller than he had ever looked before. Inches taller. "Father," he said. "I'm Colin. You can't believe it. I scarcely can myself. I'm Colin." Like Mrs. Medlock, he did not understand what his father meant when he said hurriedly, "In the garden? In the garden." "Yes," hurried on Colin. "It was the garden that did it. And Mary and Dickon and the creatures and the magic. No one knows. We kept it to tell you when you came. I'm well. I can beat Mary in a race. I'm going to be an athlete." He said it all so like a healthy boy. His face flushed, his words tumbling over each other in his eagerness, that Mr. Craven's soul shook with unbelieving joy. Colin put out his hand and laid it on his father's arm. "Aren't you glad, Father?" he ended. "Aren't you glad I'm going to live forever and ever and ever?" Mr. Craven put his hands on both the boy's shoulders and held him still. He knew he dared not even try to speak for a moment. "Take me into the garden, my boy," he said at last, "and tell me all about it." So they let him in. The place was a wilderness of autumn gold, and purple and violet blue, and flaming scarlet, and on every side were sheaves of late lilies standing together, lilies which were white or white and ruby. He remembered well when the first of them had been planted, that just as the season of the year their late glories should reveal themselves. Late roses climbed and hung and clustered, and the sunshine deepening the hue of the yellowing trees made one feel that one stood in an embowered temple of gold. The newcomer stood silent, just as the children had done when they came into its grayness. He looked round and round. "I thought it would be dead," he said. "Mary thought so at first," said Colin, "but it came alive." Then they sat down under their tree, all but Colin, who wanted to stand while he told the story. It was the strangest thing he had ever heard, Archibald Craven thought, as it was poured forth in headlong boy fashion, mystery and magic and wild creatures. The weird midnight meeting, the coming of the spring, the passion of insulted pride which had dragged the young Raja to his feet to defy the old Ben Weatherstaff to his face. The odd companionship, the play acting, the great secret so carefully kept. The listener laughed until tears came into his eyes, and sometimes tears came into his eyes when he was not laughing. The athlete, the lecturer, the scientific discoverer, was a laughable, lovable, healthy young human thing. Now, he said at the end of the story, it need not be a secret any more. I dare say it will frighten them nearly to fits when they see me, but I am never going to get into the chair again. I shall walk back with you, Father, to the house. I'm glad you like it, Mope. As I said, if you like, you can listen to the rest. There are two other videos on YouTube, chapters 1 to 10 and 11 to 20. If you have a spare 4 hours and you're bored, feel free to load them up. Ben Weatherstaff's duties rarely took him away from the gardens, but on this occasion he made an excuse to carry some vegetables to the kitchen, and being invited into the servants' hall by Mrs. Medlock to drink a glass of beer, he was on the spot, as he had hoped to be, when the most dramatic event Misselthwaite Manor had seen during the present generation actually took place. One of the windows looking upon the courtyard gave also a glimpse of the lawn. Mrs. Medlock, knowing Ben had come from the gardens, hoped that he might have caught sight of his master, and even by chance of his meeting with Master Cullen. "Did you see either of them, Weatherstaff?" she asked. Ben took his beer mug from his mouth and wiped his lips with the back of his hand. I did it. That I did," he answered, with a shrewdly significant air. "Both of them?" suggested Mrs. Medlock. "Both of them," returned Ben Weatherstaff. "Thank ye kindly, ma'am. I could sup up another mug of it." "Together?" said Mrs. Medlock hastily, overfilling his beer mug in her excitement. "Together, ma'am." And Ben gulped down half of his new mug at one gulp. "Where was Master Cullen? How did he look? What did they say to each other?" "I did not hear that," said Ben. Along o only being on the stepladder looking over the wall, but I'll tell ye this. There's been things going on outside as you house people knows naught about, and what that'll find out soon. And it was not 2 minutes before he swallowed the last of his beer, and waved his mug solemnly towards the window which took in through the shrubbery a piece of the lawn. "Look there," he said. "If thou's curious, look what's coming across the grass." When Mrs. Medlock looked, she threw up her hands and gave a little shriek, and every man and woman servant within hearing bolted across the servants' hall and stood looking through the window with their eyes almost staring out of their heads. Across the lawn came the master of Misselthwaite, and he looked as many of them had never seen him. And by his side, with his head up in the air and his eyes full of laughter, walked as strongly and steadily as any boy in Yorkshire, Master Cullen. The end. I will admit, I've had a partial tear look in my eye a few times in this reading, in this part of the book. It's a good book. I like it. There are times when I'm reading these books where my brain is like, oh, that's not realistic, or this is the real explanation for this or that, or like I mentioned before, I've gone through depression and I've had that fight and I've dealt with that, and I've applied my personal experiences to things that the Archibald has gone through. And then I was saying it before, right? It's like, it's not really about that. There is this link between him and the garden, and that's what the story is getting at. And the story is, at the end of the day, a story, not a reflection of reality. And I think I need to remind myself of that a few times. And it's a wonderfully romantic story. It is a sweet ending, which is honestly a nice change. Valana has selected a number of morbid ending books and novels that we've read lately, much because it was the October Halloween season. So we read War of the Worlds, Frankenstein, and Dracula. None of them terribly end well. Like, Like, technically, War of the Worlds we won, but at such a great price. And Dracula we won, but it was it was dark. I guess no, technically in Dracula we came away victorious. There was a loss, but certainly in Frankenstein, that was a tragedy. That was a tragic ending. It is very nice to have a pleasant ending, a happy ending, if you will. And I think the best part of this is, yeah, while we sort of make a little fun of the servants here, they come away happy too, I imagine. I think everybody wins here. That's nice too. There's no pettiness. I think these chapters were a little longer than normal. Like it's already 9:35 here. I've been trying to stick to 4-hour streams, and the first two streams were 10 chapters apiece, and this was only like, I think, 6 or 7 chapters. So scroll like crazy up here. 27. Yes, this was 7 chapters. So there's, I guess, 27 chapters in the end. Nice book. Yeah, so we're gonna like call it here, I guess. The next thing I read, maybe I will just pick a book, and we will know. I'll go through my book list here. What is The White Fang is by Jack London. It is the story of a wolf dog's journey from the wild to domestication. Excuse me as I hiccup. Following White Fang from his birth in the Yukon to his rescue from a cruel owner by a man named Whedon Scott. He got rescued properly, right? Like that. That'd be cool. The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. The summary here, the story is mainly narrated by Nick Carraway, who reflects on the life of his enigmatic neighbor Jay Gatsby and the extravagant world of wealth and excess he inhabits. The novel explores themes of the American dream. Oh wait, isn't this Valana? This is the one that Red did a thing on, right? I think that's right. That was the thing. Let's read that. That sounds like a mind-breaking exercise and like frustrated trying to follow stories. What a great thing to do to ourselves. Okay, so that's what we'll do. We will read The Great Gatsby next, and we will do that we will start on Monday, as usual. I have to make pictures again. All the pictures. Let's see. Is there someone to read tonight? Is my question. Crypt is on. People I am following. And people who are perhaps reading would be nice. Alright, we don't seem to have a reading person. Same category. Yeah, don't spoil it. We did read. Yeah, it would be nice to find someone. It might be someone. Cryptid Roots is streaming. She is doing chatting and writing with Cryptid Day 24, writing 50,000 words live. So she's writing rather than reading. But that's okay. She's a very nice lady. We do like her quite a bit. There is some writing done. That's a new person. I'm just going through the list, wondering if we could like find a new person. Writing. I think a lot of people do writing rather than reading. Maybe trying to write with a headache. Maybe you should just go lay down. Okay, let's go to Cryptid. She is a little louder than I am, but she doesn't have a channel that's set to a followers only. Why don't I do Christmas? It isn't already. I am not going to participate in holidays. I know a lot of people love to do that, and that's cool and all. I do know that there are some people who prefer not to be inundated with like the holiday festivities. It is very much flooded into our world on a day by day basis, and some people definitely don't appreciate that the same as others do. So I would rather be a channel where people can come take a break from that, and we can just do normal everyday stuff. There's plenty of opportunity for people to celebrate their own ways outside of the channel. So I think that's the kind of place I want to be. Yeah, and it'll be the same thing with like Valentine's Day. People very much, there are a lot of people who are, there people who have the, have you ever heard of the holiday blues? Like, or especially around things like Christmas, Valentine's Day is the same way. I want to be a place people can come to and perhaps get away from that. That's a real thing. So, yeah, cool. So start this here. So, thank you very much for coming. Oh man, and all the raids were wonderful. Well, Mopile, it was awesome seeing you. Thank you very much for dropping by. Creative Garden and Vexing Cat. Very much appreciate you bringing your communities here. Thank you very kindly. Appreciate it very much. Before we leave, please do remember to return your reading materials to the shelves, however, and be kind to one another.